Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to welcome you to the April 8th regular meeting of Council. I wish to respectfully recognize the Coast Salish Nations upon whose traditional territories we are now located. First up on the agenda this evening is the adoption of the minutes of the Council meeting held March the 16th, 2015. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any additions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Then we also have the minutes of the Committee of the Whole Budget Operation meeting held March 26th, 2015. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that meeting? Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any omissions, deletions, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have a busy agenda this evening. We have 3 delegations. And the first delegation, and he tells me that he's got it down to 9 minutes and 20 seconds. I'm sorry, what did I do wrong now?
Approval of the agenda.
Yeah. Okay.
All in favor?
All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Agenda. Why do we put that there? Okay. We have 3 delegations, as I said earlier. The first delegation is Trevor Wicks, and Trevor tells me that he's got it down to about 9 minutes and 25 seconds. So, Trevor, you're on. Go ahead. Welcome.
Your Worship, Council. My name is Trevor Wicks. I live in Hawthorne Drive in Qualicum Beach, and my presentation is about alternative water supplies concepts for the City of Parksville. So the City of Parksville depends on both groundwater and surface water to supply a population of just about 12,000 people. Within the area, there are thousands of wells. The area that supplies the groundwater recharge for the City of Parksville in general is located between Buckerfields and Springwood Middle School, to Little Mountain, to the Co-op gas station, Wildlife Recovery Centre and Church Road in Errington. That's the general area of the recharge for groundwater. The groundwater levels at an observation well, that's not a pumped well, in Springwood Park have continued to drop over the last few years. When I first arrived here many years ago, it was springs, and now it's down to 11 meters, 30 feet, and as I said, historically it's been at ground level, so it's dropped 30 feet in 25 years. The continued decline indicates that the extraction at the current rate is unsustainable. It cannot continue. So the lowering groundwater levels also increase the risk to human health from contaminating land uses in the groundwater recharge areas, because you're drawing at the bottom of the barrel. The current surface water intake for the summer use is not a dependable or reliable place, in a reliable place, and has many concerns for extracting water that low in the watershed. So the watersheds inland from the coast provide an excellent potential for high elevation water storage. Storing high quality water at high elevation has many benefits. The water is relatively clean. There are minimal contamination risks. It can provide ecological and fisheries benefits. It can eliminate the need for summer extraction from the river. It can reduce storm flooding, will flow downhill for free. It requires a very low cost of operation. It can generate some electric power, and the supply can go to many different areas. It's not a one-shot deal. It can go to many different places. So the concept, and this is one of many, and I hope there'll be many more concepts come out, that the high flow diversion and storage of water would occur in the late fall, winter, spring, and early summer during storm events, only when the river is running at a surplus. An example, there are many examples, and I have my model out there with probably 15 or 20 other ones, of a portion of the watershed for high elevation water storage. This particular area is between 250 and 300 meters in elevation, so it's quite high above the city. What would happen is that a channel overflow structure would be installed on the side of the main stream or creek or river. The existing creek or river would not be directly impacted. It's only the overflow that would run into the side, the side channel. So the side channels are on the side of the river, not a dam, and the diversion channel would then take the water to storage ponds through a flume or channel, culvert, drainway, whatever, and even wetlands could be incorporated into that system to carry water from the overflow into the constructed ponds, which would be developed within floodplain areas and suitable for the ecological area. So they would only occur in places where they wouldn't destroy otherwise, really good habitat, but in floodplains, and they would then turn into this kind of feature after a few years. They would go back to a natural setting. So these ponds and lakes would be vegetated with indigenous plants and trees, and the many retention areas that could receive this water would be as well recharged from surface runoff from the area. So they're not totally dependent on the stream or creek. They would also receive water from the surrounding area. Oops, I've gone too far. So overflow structures could be installed. This is quite a simple concept. That would allow the water to fill to a certain level, and then the surplus could be run onto another pond, and eventually, if there's enough water, could go back to the river. But it would fill the ponds to a maximum level first. So the interesting part of this discussion is that around these ponds, reservoirs, lakes, whichever we call them, there are multiple shallow wells dug or drilled and at an appropriate distance from the reservoirs. That's a very important part of it. Have to be far enough and not too close. So, an adequate distance, because you want natural filtration to occur through the soil. So the water from the reservoirs will infiltrate and recharge the groundwater continuously into these wells. And the wells are interconnected with small diameter siphon pipes. So the pipes are not large. They're probably in between wells, maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches to maximum downhill of 4 inches. So we're not talking large, expensive pipe systems. This is relatively small, but that they can carry the water downhill under high pressure because of the elevation. So there's no cost at moving the water from the uphill regions down to the communities. The siphon pipes are sized for continuous flow with remotely controlled valves downhill. So the levels could be controlled remotely. You wouldn't have to go up and service these pipelines, because the reservoir headwater, which would recharge in case they did lose the siphon effect, could be powered by inline turbine generators. Micro inline turbines could be installed anywhere in the downhill pressure side of the supply system. And these are fairly easy and common to use. They can generate electricity. So the advantages of a multiple small diameter high pressure gravity line is that there are many options to either take the water and supply it to different areas within the demand area. So it could go into north of Parksville, or west of Parksville, east of Parksville, wherever. And these smaller lines could be installed, I would assess, very easily, like they do gas pipelines. They come in one day and the pipeline is in and it's done. So many suitable floodplains exist within the watershed. There are a number of logging roads. This map, you can just see the logging roads in there. But there is access to most of these areas because of the logging industry. And much of these floodplains are not usable for heavy forestry. So when the ponds are established, or the lakes are established, I'll call them lakes, it sounds better. The lakes are established, this is what I could see them looking like. And they could be stocked with fish and used for recreational purposes. So when the lakes are full and the water is flowing downhill, there are many other options. Because the water is under pressure, it can travel a long way without any pumps involved at all. So two possible locations for additional water storage as backup would be the area behind the industrial park that the city owns, that is partly sold now. I won't say what for, but there is a good-sized pond in there, lake in there, that could be somewhat sealed and used as a reservoir. And other places, for example, on K Road, where there are some old abandoned gravel pits. But there are a number of places where this additional water in the wintertime could keep flowing and recharging the groundwater that has been declining so rapidly. This is basically the same, to put it in perspective, behind the way scales. So there is another option. 9 minutes and 15 seconds. Another option is the underground stream that is probably flowing from the Englishman River from Top Ridge into Craig Bay, and that hasn't been proven as far as I know, but that photograph from courtesy of Google Earth shows fairly clearly that there is a stream of fresh water flowing through that area somewhere in a crack or crevice in the rock, and that there would be a very good supply of water in the future as an alternative. Developing well fields upstream is another option, and there are many places in the upstream area, typically in the Top Bridge Regional Park. There's a gravel pit there that is part of a floodplain, and the same situation, digging a lake or pond and wells could provide additional water. Cost of drilling a well, $12,000 to $20,000 according to the well driller, and pipe 10-inch, that's way bigger than I've suggested, $26,000 a kilometre. So I'm up to time nearly. Potential sites, this picture basically says where the current intake is, the new intake above the inland highway, but there are many places upstream where a well field could be established in pristine or relatively pristine land. So other things that should be encouraged: rainwater harvesting, storage and utilization systems that are current and very common in many areas, for industrial and for landscape irrigation. And this is another one that I think I mentioned this in 2002, and somebody from the city said, well, where are we going to get pure, clean drinking water from? And I said, well, maybe you don't have any pure, clean drinking water. Free of chemicals, and you use UV disinfection, because we know it has to be disinfected. But these systems do provide free water to fill up bottles or whatever on an ongoing basis. And I would encourage anybody from council who hasn't seen Paul Manley's video, Troubled Water. It's now had 23,300 views, and it's a very interesting documentary to compare Victoria and this local area's drinking water. I request that the City of Parksville Council initiate discussion about backup plans as the groundwater supplies are becoming contaminated and insufficient. Thank you very much.
Trevor, thank you very much. That's the longest and most enthusiastic applause I've ever heard in this council chamber. So thank you. Questions from members of council. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have maybe 3 or 4 questions. Now that we got you here, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Thanks, Trevor, for your presentation. I have heard you present your ideas on a couple of occasions, and to a layman like myself, it seems like common sense approach to our problem here in Parksville. However, you get no credit for your plan from members of the RWS committee. They don't buy into your ideas. Why do you suppose that is?
I actually, with all respect, Your Worship and Council, that I think the plan was set many years ago to develop a system primarily to serve Fairwinds, the development in Nanuus. And by saying that, I think that the system had to provide enough water for a large development and a pipeline installed into the area that could eventually pump water to Nanuus, and that was the reason that the discussion went this way behind closed doors. This was never, as far as I know, and we did own property and I was involved with this discussion for many years, that this was never a public issue as to how the future would look for Parksville's water supply. And I firmly believe, but I can't prove, that the reason that we went in that direction, and that just by coincidence the initial place that was going to be receiving aquifer storage and recovery was only a few hundred meters from Fairwinds. So it seems strange that Qualicum Beach were scheduled to be paying into this system, but there was no indication or recognition that any of the aquifer storage and recovery was ever going to happen on the Qualicum and French Creek side of Parksville. So I was suspicious right from the word go. So I think I've been shut down because this discussion is a lot to do with Fairwinds initially, and now it's changed because Fairwinds is for sale. So I think.
We have professional engineers who have done all our studies and come up with proper situations, prices, so many figures and facts. I was wondering what your credentials are compared to what they've given us.
Well, I have a master's degree in practical experience, a doctor's degree in common sense and logic, and that's about all I can say. That didn't come from any university, but it came from probably 60 years of interest in water. I was raised in a valley with a flooding problem at the time, and it is so dry in that valley now because they pumped all the water out. And so I've seen it from a long time ago.
One other question I have you talked to the Ministry of Environment and the DFO to see what approvals would be required and what the approval process would be for your plan?
No, I haven't taken it that far. All I'm doing is throwing out an idea, a concept for people to start the discussion that the current, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, that the current situation is a standstill. 5 years or more, and many millions of dollars have created nothing. There's nothing to show for it. So what I'm looking at right now is at a standstill. So I think the process should start from scratch, look at every alternative that could be available. I'm not saying this is the best alternative, but it is one, or those alternatives should be considered, because they could be done. This whole process should have been finished by now, and that we don't have to take surface water if we can use groundwater, which San Periel and Qualicum and many other jurisdictions use groundwater, and all they require is disinfection. It doesn't have to require a full treatment plant, so only disinfection.
Right. These are some of the questions that I've heard the ERWS mention. I'll give you one more. Have you reviewed senior government legislation to see if this proposal is allowable? In other words, does your plan meet government approvals?
I have no idea. But I think that DFO, I mean, I've been involved with water issues and talked with DFO for many, many years, and I think that the extraction of large amounts of water in the dry period of summer, July, August, September, is their real problem, is the fact that this would require no extraction of water during the driest summer months if this type of plan, and there are many other components that could be incorporated in this. I only had 10 minutes, and that's 3 hours worth of material.
Right.
So, I mean, that's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of options.
Well, I appreciate you coming. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Oates, Councillor Salter, and then Councillor Beale.
Thank you. In your presentation, well, let me go back first in response to a question from Councillor Greer about if you talked to DFO or Department of Environment about the permits that would be required, you said that you know that had not happened. Yet in the presentation that you gave us tonight, you said that the diversion of the rivers and creeks would be not directly impacted by that. How can you make that statement?
Well, it's a hypothetical statement because the direct impact would only take the high overflow water. It's not like we're building a dam and stopping the water or even diverting the whole creek, which is what happens in many situations to actually divert the creek. The control to allow the surplus water would only allow that water to come out and nothing else. The river, the creek, and the fish could just move as they always have.
But
so there is no...
But there's a possibility that Department of Fisheries and Oceans would have a different opinion on
well,
that.
that's why consultants are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, with all respect, and I'm doing this for free. They can sort that out. I mean...
Let's get on with the questions.
I find your question a little bit, Mr. Mayor, I find your question a little bit insulting, because you know that I'm doing this as a volunteer and you're expecting me to answer you as a professional. So get the professionals in on it. I'm just opening the door for the question.
I'm just trying to get to the facts,
yeah, well, I
Mr.
haven't.
Wicks.
I've spent probably $1,000.
When you present to us a slide that says that the rivers and creeks are not directly impacted by the diversion, I suggest to you that that's probably a statement that is not supported by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, given our recent experience with the intake of our proposal.
Give them the option that they have now, and give them that option and see which one they choose.
So in essence, what you're asking us to do is to hire a professional to do this, to repeat what we've already done.
Order. Listen, this is a dialogue between council and Mr. Wicks. Nobody else, please.
So you wish us to go back and do over again what we've already done?
No, sir.
What's different?
Well, if you can't see any difference between this proposal and what they have brought into practice over the last 5 years, I would suggest you should look to see what they've planned to do, to take the water from the lower reaches of the river, have a diversion
I got
and
a couple more
treatment
questions.
plant. Thank you.
I did take the opportunity to go on to your website.
Thank you.
And look through it there, and it's interesting. You talk about in your presentation as well that you presented here to us tonight that one of the possible locations for the reservoir would be down at the Public Works Yard.
The piece of land behind the Public Works Yard, as an example.
Right. How does that piece of land differ from the other pieces of land around it you say the water is not fit to pull from because of the contamination from the flow? How is that different?
I explained in the presentation that the water would come from the higher reaches of the watershed. Wouldn't be taken from the lower reaches of the watershed. It would be piped from 250, 300 to 500 meters, and the water at that elevation is relatively clean. But I also mentioned about putting wells around the outside of any reservoir, so the straw isn't actually in the reservoir. The water is actually extracted from wells, which is a different scenario. Depends how far the wells are away from the reservoir. That's very important.
And the wells, that was where I was going to go next.
Okay.
You talked about the wells being connected by these small pipes.
Yes.
How do we prevent obstructions?
Hire a consultant.
Great idea, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Beale. Or Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Your Worship. And, I just want to say thank you for coming tonight, Trevor. We have been waiting to hear from you, so we're glad you're here. And I think, most of council are really happy to see the community engaged in this process, so good on all of you. So what I'm getting is that there are more options really possibly out there than what we're doing right now, since we only have one option now, and you're sort of showing us other options which could be reviewed. I'm just wondering, how do you see the future, though, of the ERWS and the aquifer storage and treatment, as far as going forward?
Well, I think the record speaks for itself, in my opinion. 5 years, and some people say $5 million, but we don't know, is way too much to have spent without any results. And so I would suggest that the ERWS should be considered to be history, and that we need to look at some other direction. And it could be like District Water Board or some other management system, because the mandate for the Englishman River Water Service is so narrow that all they can really do is build an intake somewhere down below in the river and build a water treatment plant. It's going to have to pump the water uphill to do that. My system doesn't have any pumps really at all. And it will involve a tremendous amount of maintenance to keep the proposed system going. So
I have a follow-up. And then you talked about building these retention ponds or lakes. I'm wondering, how difficult would it be for anyone to get out there to actually dig those lakes? Is it possible to use the logging roads?
Very easy, very easy. They're actually, the logging roads are built for large trucks because the forest industry roads have been handling the trucks. So I'm not suggesting taking this type of situation to places that don't have access. There would be no point. So the idea is that get to places where there is access, where the topography and the vegetation and everything is suitable. And I've been up there many times, and I know that there are areas in there that that are suitable for this type of function. Specifically where they are, it's a good question. It needs to be explored. But it wouldn't take more than 2 or 3 guys in a pickup truck to drive around and say, well, this looks good, and talk to the forest companies. 100 hectares of area that was converted into lakes, only 1 meter of that water would produce 1 million cubic meters of drinking water. So only 1 meter deep of drop in the summertime from 100 hectares of land would give you 1 million cubic meters. Thank you. 1 million cubic meters of drinking water. So the possibility is really tremendous to be able to do that. The watershed is 324 square kilometers, and logging companies own most of it, all of it. So it has to be in cooperation, but they maybe could benefit from this, the logging companies. It may not be a hard sell because they could actually, you could lease. I mean, there are many ways to work this. There's also electric power.
Well, and it does sound like something that's worth looking into. I know that Port Alberni did something quite similar back in the day because they brought a water pipe down Rogers Creek, and that's how they fed Port Alberni. It was exactly the same system. It was gravity fed. I just have one more question, and that is the Craig Bay River that you said is an underground river. That sounds like a possibility too. So we could possibly dig a well there. And if we were able to drill a well, then there would be no need for a treatment plant, would there?
Well, that's a good question, because I spoke to a very well-qualified geologist about 20 years ago, Al Ruprecht. Anybody from the Parksville residences, he's a retired geologist, and he showed me where the water is actually, the diversion happened when the cut that carried the Englishman River into Craig Bay was plugged with debris, logs, presumably, at some point, and the river actually diverted at a right angle bend and came into Parksville. So underneath, somewhere near the waste scales, there is a crack in the rock, similar to the one at Top Ridge, that carries water underground into Craig Bay. I've heard this from several different people. There's fresh water in Craig Bay. So somewhere between those 2 points, there may be a piece 10 feet wide, who knows, that carries fresh water. And that would be a good question, whether it actually needed to be treated at all. But unless that would take some investigation to find out where that is, but presumably it would only need to be disinfected, not a full water treatment. There's a whole thing about water treatment. Disinfection is not full water treatment, but it has to be done according to VHA.
Thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Trevor, for tonight. I just had a couple of questions. One, yes, I noticed here that you provides ecological and fisheries benefits, so I just wonder if you could speak any more about the fisheries benefits. I'm just not sure what they are.
Okay, well, when the river in the wintertime is in full flood, it washes the eggs that are spawned in the fall. An overflow situation, no, I shouldn't say overflow because I mentioned, okay, a flood situation in the river can dislodge and silt up the eggs that are embedded into the lower reaches of the Englishman River. So these big surges of water that typically flow over and flood Mountaindale Road are a real problem for fisheries. So if some of that water was diverted into off-channel storage with overflow, that would eliminate some of that water from coming down the river in the big storm surge. So there potentially could be a lot of water actually during the fall. November is the rainiest or the most precipitation month of any in this area. So during that time, if the ponds and lakes allow, they can take some of that water from the river and release less of the turbidity.
I noticed in your presentation you mentioned that that your proposal, your plan would have lower operational costs. Do we have any notion of what the costs would be to either purchase the actual land that would be involved and or right-of-way in order to actually actualize such a proposal?
I talked to somebody recently and they said there's 60 acres of land, of forest land, which is pristine, and it's for sale for $650,000. So that's 60, I think 60 hectares, I'm not sure. It was just in a conversation, I didn't write anything down. But when you're talking about forest land way up in the watershed, floodplain land that may not be suitable for logging, I'm sure the price is negotiable, especially if there was a lease agreement or, heaven forbid, expropriation, because it's in the ENN land grant, which they got the land for free originally. So I think there's room for talking about, well, surely we're entitled to some of this land to just supply water for the community and not rely on the bottom end of the river.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Trevor, for coming forward. You make so much common sense.
Thank you.
All right, so at the beginning of your presentation, we talked a little bit about Springwood, the well, and that it has decreased, and I'm not sure what you said exactly, 25 meters?
No, 11.5 meters. It has been dropping continuously for the last 12, 15 years, even in the winter time, when typically groundwater should be recharging. But the difficulty with this decline is that when groundwater is over-extracted, the ground actually settles, and it cannot possibly hold the same volume of water again. So it's a one-shot deal. Once you've over-extracted an aquifer to that degree, the ground at Springwood Park has probably dropped a meter or half a meter, possibly, I don't know. It's never been measured, but that's what typically happens around. And where I lived, the ground in some places has dropped 3 meters just from taking the water out of the ground. So it's not like an empty vessel that if you stop pumping, the ground will recharge, it will come back up again. It will never go back up, and you never get that storage back again. So in my opinion, all of those wells, or most of them, should be shut down. We shouldn't be extracting any more water.
So you don't typically anticipate any of those wells recharging with, if we were to look at something different with ponds and...
Over the long term, no. They can't possibly recharge to the capacity. The water table may be near the surface, but the volume will be much less than they ever were before. The only way an aquifer can maintain its availability of water is if every winter, every year, it comes back to the surface to its historic and original level. And these certainly aren't. And that's happening in several places. One place not far away has dropped 60 feet.
Okay. Follow up? So when you talked a little bit about Craig Bay, and that you're kind of assuming that there's an underground river.
Well, the Englishman River, I believe, according to several different conversations, has historically gone into Craig Bay, somewhere near the weigh scales. I don't know. And it was probably just a crack in the rocks, like those narrow channels.
But if we were to do a well or something there, would it not just have the same result as the existing wells that we currently have?
It's not ideal, but the river flow The source of that water, what we're talking about is the drinking water source. In the case of the Englishman River, the source is 324 square kilometre watershed, which the top reaches are very pristine. I'm just saying these are options that could be, a pump could be in there within a month, pumping water to Parksville for $25,000, $30,000 for drilling the hole and piping. I mean, it's not a big deal to drill a well. I've been around many dozens of wells being drilled. It's not a big deal. So if they hit the spot, if they missed it, that's too bad. But it's not one of these big long-term deals.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation, Trevor.
Okay.
I'm just curious. I know that the water and where it flows is an extremely complicated.
Yes.
And I had an opportunity to talk to Faye Smith about the fish in the river and the DFO, etc.
Yes.
Last week. And there is an underground, I'm not sure what it's called, that seeps into the Englishman River that helps provide the water to support the fish.
Yeah, it's happening all the way along the river.
So the thing is what we're talking about, if we drill wells anywhere near that river, we're going to deplete that water source that is let me finish, I'll let you talk.
Sure.
We're going to deplete the water that comes into the Englishman River that supports the fish. So I think no matter what we do, we're going to have to be accountable for future generations about where that water comes from and how we leave this community. And so I know that you have done numerous researches around this area. You're very familiar. I've seen some of your maps. They're quite detailed. They're 3D. They're amazing. But at the same time, I think that to say that we have spent 5 years and over $5 million on nothing is an unfair comment.
Okay.
And I think that I would like to acknowledge the work that staff has done, and they have worked at behest of council to come up with something for a water treatment plant that we were directed to have. We're looking at the aquifer storage and refresh to store water for the dry months of summer, and so we won't be taking water from the Englishman River. The other piece is that we have contracted an international renowned consultant to provide us with the best option available to the city. And so what we're doing is we're going into an existing, it was supposed to be a phased-in concept, and it took us 20 years, and so now it's not a phased-in because it's too long. We were supposed to have that intake higher up the river a long time ago. And so I guess my frustration is that you don't have credentials, but you come to council and you have these ideas. And I like the ideas. Like, some ideas have value, but I think at the beginning of this whole process, you did do a presentation to council. You had a meeting over at the PCCC, and you did bring up your ideas. And I believe at that time, staff did the research of some of the issues you requested. And finally, we had open meetings. There was community people that were involved in the meetings, and the CAO can correct me if I'm wrong. And I would just like to say that, because when you do your presentation, you make it sound like we have not done due diligence, that we're having behind closed doors meetings. Mm-hmm. That's not my understanding. I think that more than one part of the community has been involved in those meetings. And so I guess that's my conundrum. Like, they were involved. How come now we're hearing they weren't involved? And so I'm going to ask the CAO to explain to me how many meetings were held in public, for the public, with the stakeholders.
Can I answer
that number.
Can I answer the question?
I'm just going to ask Fred, and then you can ask your question.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, that was done as part of the stakeholder consultation portion of ERWS. I believe Mr. Squire can tell us the exact number and probably who were included in those meetings as well.
Yeah, certainly, through your worship. We had a community working group prior to us starting the preliminary design. We have the conceptual plan, but we involved stakeholders in the community. I can't name them all. I've, in previous presentations, had them. We had 4 meetings with the community working group through the preliminary design process. We've also had 2 open houses, one in the news, one here in Parksville, and every time where it came to a report being prepared, it was presented to the ERWS board in a public. As part of the communication strategy, we also have a web page where we have all the reports and everything, minutes of the board meetings, etc. As far as water is concerned, it is open book. We're a water purveyor. We have to. Has to be public knowledge.
Okay. Are there any further questions for a second? You have a comment? A quick comment from you.
And so just to go back to that, the stakeholders, Mr. Squire, were present when they did the consultation. The consultant did their presentations, right? They were part of that process when all those presentations and the explanation and the rationale and the reasoning, they were present during that. Okay. Thank you.
Just a follow-up on the, I'll get a word in here before we go around the table again. But with regards to the overall issue of using surface water, and you've talked about that in your presentation, the minute you use surface water, we now are faced with the specter of the Department of Public Health telling us that the water must be of a certain water quality standard. And therefore, the only choice we have is to treat the water. That's something that's not going to go away. That's a given. And I think you understand and you recognize that.
Absolutely.
The minute you touch surface water, the surface water's got to be treated.
Yes.
So wherever that water comes from whatever source, it needs to be treated.
I have to clarify a point that all water originates as surface water. To get into the ground, it starts as surface water. The drinking water source for the well field starts as surface water. Some of it runs down Romney Creek. So the land use between Buckerfields, Church Road, and the Wildlife Recovery Centre in Errington and Little Mountain is a surface water source, actually, but it recharges the groundwater. So I agree, and absolutely,
but
treating water is...
You must also agree that the ideal time to take water out of the Englishman River is in the wintertime.
That's why I suggested...
When we get extreme high flows for months and months on end.
That's what I just said. Yeah.
Okay, so you're not disputing that. Okay.
No, not at all.
Okay, who has, and by the way, one other comment for me, it's more of a comment, you talked about it a few moments ago. When you talk about the land in the higher elevation areas, that's not Crown-owned land,
no.
That's land that's owned by the logging companies.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Salter.
Well, thank you, Worship. So I just want to kind of clarify something here. I think for all of us, it seems to me that we should be, as council, inviting the community to speak to us. And I'm not sure that when we do that...
Please let's have the discussion between Mr. Wicks and council, okay, so we can understand and we can hear all the questions and hear the answers, please.
So I'm not sure that this, I don't really think it's on that when we do invite them to come to speak to us, and that is exactly what Mr. Wicks is doing and anyone else who speaks to us at any time. They're not coming in saying they're experts. They're coming in saying, look, I've got some local knowledge. I want to speak to you about this. I've been looking into this for these years. This is what I found, and I don't think dismissing what they have to say is a way for us to go. We really need to listen, and I think we need to consider those possible options rather than driving forward here with one option only, because it isn't working. We know it isn't working, and so does everyone else. So that's my
Thank you.
2 cents.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, certainly some observations I have is that there are a lot of ideas here that are in common, both with Trevor Wicks' proposal here as well as with the proposal with the ERWS, such as pulling water out during the high production times in the winter so that it's not needed to be done in the summer and so on and so forth. One thing I note, though, Trevor, in your presentation, you have water stored either in open reservoirs that could become ponds and lakes and then to recharge the wells, but also closer to the town boundaries that they would be stored in reservoir type things, okay, which is similar to what we have right now. Now, when I spoke with the engineering department some time ago, I asked about that as opposed to the ASR proposal, and my understanding was that that was more costly, because I think that something that council does have to be concerned with is, of course, the safety of our drinking water, but also the costs and how to do this in an efficient way that also meets all the requirements. So my understanding, and I wonder if we could ask that question of Mr. Squires, if our engineering department had also looked into the cost of producing standalone reservoirs as opposed to ASR.
I believe that's been done, but I'll ask Mr. Squire anyway.
Yes, through your worship. The concept of open water reservoirs, essentially if you're pulling water directly out of open water reservoirs, they have to be covered. That's your legislation. An example of that is in Nanaimo. They used to have an above-ground open water reservoir off in Nanaimo Lakes Road. I don't know if you have seen it. They had water coming through it. They've actually had to deactivate that now. The second aspect of pulling water out of a known open water source, such as the Englishman River or an open pond, is what you call, if you're pulling it out from a well, it's called a goody, groundwater under the influence of surface water. And it's very much like down in San Periel wells. Those are actually determined, or one of the wells is determined to be goody. So it's directly attributed to the surface water source. So essentially, depending on what water results coming out of the well, you have to treat those to a different standard. You have to treat that water. Unlike any other well where it's drilled in a deep aquifer, you don't currently have to treat, other than add, the health authority asks us to add chlorine residual for disinfection for the purpose of health protection.
Quick follow-up.
And I'm just wondering, was there consideration or looking into the costs or feasibilities of covered reservoirs?
Those would be cost prohibitive. There's many examples of that. And again, Nanaimo went away from that as their open water reservoir. It'd be fairly extensive. In an area that is unprotected like that, you would have to have a triple barrier of security, potentially of some vandalism threats to that surface. That's what the health authority would want us to mitigate.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. You've certainly initiated and ignited a lot of more debate on the ideas that you brought forward. Thanks again for coming. Appreciate it. Our next delegation is the Parksville and District Historical Society requests for approval to operate farmers market and artisan market. Gentlemen.
Your Worship, members of Council, thank you. Just give us a moment to set up and we'll get underway. Can I have his extra minutes? You're going to help me? Thank you. Yes, perfect. Have that one. Thank you. The Parksville and District Historical Society has been in operation for 40 years. The society operates the Parksville Museum and Archives, which is located in Craig Heritage Park, and we have an impressive collection of heritage buildings and artifacts, most over 100 years old, which have an appraised replacement value of over $1.7 million. We believe that the past anchors the present and the future, fostering a sense of community. We believe that to build a community, we need to understand the past. We believe that our role is to educate and to inform. We believe that our museum is a community facility that belongs to the entire community. We believe that farmers and artisans are an integral part of our community. Our success indicators when we operate the museum are attendance, financial stability, and community awareness. Those are and those three things have to work in harmony with each other. We are requesting approval to operate a farmers market on Fridays from May 22nd to October 9th this year, an artisans market, which is new, on Sundays from July 5th to August 30th, and we'd like to add in a Halloween event for children in October. Details would come later. We don't have that fully fleshed out. Our objectives are to increase awareness and attendance at the museum, to engage with a wider community so as to expand the role of the museum in the community, to improve membership, income, and cash flow so that we can keep the doors open. Last year we did receive approval from Council to operate a pilot farmers market, and the market ran on Fridays from July 11th to September 26th, and at the end of the day was regarded as an outstanding success, and our report to Council was very well received by all members of Council. Our results comparing average attendance for the prior 3 years, attendance increased by 436%. The market generated over 6,000 visitors. Many had never visited the museum before but had driven past for years. We had 37 vendors as well as 8 demonstrations and non-profit groups involved. Some of our vendors were mixed and varied. Not-for-profit societies were involved, and they had free booths at the market. We had demonstrations of artisan skills, and they too had free booths. Added interest and dimension to the market that was appreciated all round. A great variety of products from, well, everything that was edible. Lots of people attended, and people relaxed, enjoyed selling, or were shopping. People said they liked the atmosphere. The market resonated with the values of an earlier era. It was comfortable, safe, and secure. It was kid and pet friendly. It was accessible to wheelchair users, and when asked, people now know about the museum. It's where they have a farmers market. During the market, the museum was open and free to the public. We had several sellout markets where tables were empty or 80% sold out. We anticipated and worked with problems of traffic flow and parking. And as we look at 2015, we know we need to do some further work on the parking challenges that we're faced with. In our discussions with the Chamber of Commerce, who are our neighbor, we need to more closely manage the parking at the Chamber of Commerce so that we don't interfere with parking for the Visitors Information Center. And so what we propose to do is effectively, when the Visitors Information Center is open, close off the areas for parking so that the market users will not park there, they will park elsewhere. And we will redirect market visitors to alternate location behind the Heritage Mall during times when the Visitor Information Center is open. We will also need to add a person, a body, pit bull if you like, who will help move people out of the lot who don't belong there. In other words, if they're at the market, they should not be parking in the Visitor Information Center lot. They should park elsewhere. When we look at last year, the effect on the area from Craig Bay, our residents across the road, no complaints. In fact, they walked over in droves. Current discussions indicate that we still need to continue to monitor parking, noise, and litter, which we've done before. The Chamber of Commerce also have no significant complaints, but they do ask us to deal with the issue of parking at in front of their facilities so we don't interfere with their operation. They have expressed concerns about the Sunday market when the Visitor Information Center is open, and that time we plan to keep that a lot clear of our visitors by ensuring that they park elsewhere. And that'll be handled through our brochures, through our website, and by literally directing people on the ground to move elsewhere. As far as the RCMP are concerned, they had no complaints or problems with traffic flow or parking around the museum on Northwest Bay Road or on Franklin's Gulf. As far as noise and litter was concerned, no complaints, but many compliments on the overall appearance and cleanliness of the site. The effect on the museum last year was to triple our membership, doubled our income for the season. We see a cultural change. The museum is now seen as a friendly, welcoming place to go to and learn about our local history. New volunteers have emerged, and we received several unexpected donations of historical value. The market brings the museum alive and has readied us to move on to the next stage of community involvement. Connecting two unlikely entities, a museum with a farmer's market, created an unexpected synergy. The outcome was greater than the sum of the individual components. The museum has stories and memories to share, and to do this, we need an audience. There's no point in having a museum with nobody in it. To obtain our audience, we need to draw people to the facility through the operation of special events, and it's a kind of a yin and yang relationship. As we look to the future, we still think we need to do something about zoning of the site to a more appropriate zoning designation, although I suppose we can keep coming to council on a regular basis about our special events, and that's okay with us, but it's a lot of work. If it's something that can be done, how would this be initiated? So for 2015, we need approval to operate a farmers market from May to October, an artisans market on Sunday afternoons, July and August, and that's new. A Halloween event for children, dates to be determined, but probably October. And a Christmas market in December, and again, that's at a very early stage of planning, and we would come back to council about that when we feel we've got something that's workable. We need to do some more work on that. And finally, thank you to council and city staff for assistance in our success in 2014, and for your patience in reviewing our 2015 request. To the Craig Bay residents for your participation and involvement. Support was greatly appreciated. They're great neighbours. Chamber of Commerce for their support and tolerance of our parking and traffic challenges. Collectively, we enriched the tourist experience. And thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. It looks like nothing succeeds like success.
We're working on it.
Councillor Powell, and who else? Councillor Patterson, did you have your hand up? No, Councillor Powell, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm really glad that it's been successful. One of the things, I know that we initially approved this, it was on a pilot basis, and now I think it's time, because it looks like you're going to do more and more, so I think we do need to look at the rezoning and for the change in allowable uses. And so through you to the CAO, the Director of Planning, sorry, what would be the next steps to take for this group? Because I think it is getting bigger. It's proved that it's a very good event for you. And so I don't think it's fair for other businesses that have had to get the rezoning to not have you do the same thing.
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Powell. My understanding is there's a couple of things that would need to occur. One would be the city, and that would typically be through representation through the CAO, would make an application to rezone the property, and that would be with council authorization to proceed. The planning department would then review the application with other city departments and bring back a report with a recommendation. One of the aspects of the property, though, is the majority of the property is also designated as park. And that has land use implications under common law, at least my understanding of common law, which may require a change in that designation from parkland to another, to basically a fee simple lot, either through a park exchange or some other kind of parkland transfer.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Question to our CAO. Our delegation tonight is asking for a request for the approval to operate the farmers market and the artisan market. And so I'm wondering, at this point in time, can I make that recommendation?
If I may, Your Worship, the simple answer is yes. The longer answer to this is it is a little bit complicated in that the zoning for the property right now, as was indicated, it is parkland, and it's also zoned in such a way that the wording is special events. So the more an event occurs, the less special it becomes. So the other part of this is, as was alluded, the common law. If, I guess in this case, parkland is using for-profit, there is business commerce occurring. Is that an appropriate use for parkland? Again, at some point, it becomes inappropriate. Now, whether this is special use or not, that's really gray area. At the limit that's being asked for right now, with the 21 farmers markets and I believe 9 artisan markets, I think you could probably still argue that that is special use, so it would be appropriate. Sometime in the future, if council wanted to, or if the Historical Society wanted to expand this, I guess 2 options. One is council direct staff to start the process of rezoning to allow for additional uses. But as was indicated, that would have to occur after the current park designation was removed. And that can only be removed with the assent of the electorate.
Follow-up?
So that would require a referendum, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
Okay. Just so that the Parksville and District Historical Society is aware and where their next steps and everything are. But at this point in time, for the 2015 season, and that, can I make that recommendation to approve?
If I may, Your Worship, a recommendation or at least a resolution, something to the effect that the Parksville District Historical Society requests for 21 farmers markets and 4 artisan markets be approved would be appropriate.
Okay. Do you want to make a recommendation, or do you want to listen to a few other
Well, we can
comments?
have the rest
Let's
of
make some more. Let's
discussion
get some
and
other comments. Councillor Powell.
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Greer seconded, so it's on the floor. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I'm sort of torn with this one because, one, other people have come to council to request rezoning because it doesn't fit. And so I wouldn't call this special. We've had it all last year. We're having it again this year. So I don't think that's a special event. Maybe 1 time or 2 times a year is a special event. Maybe the Halloween is a special event. Maybe Christmas is a special event. I think we're playing with numbers. We're playing with gray areas, and I think that we should make the rezoning happen, and then that way it's clean. Other people have had to come to council to get rezoning done in order to have their things move forward, so I won't be supporting this.
Okay, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much for your presentation. I was there 2 or 3 times, and it was excellent. And I can see from your figures that it has been a very big success. I would suggest that I would support this motion for this year, and then that gives us another year to look at what we have to do. So you'd have to come back as soon as possible, and we might discuss what would happen from this point on. But I think we should approve it for this year. Thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also like to support this motion or resolution for this year. I do see that the proposal or the request that you put forth is in fact different from last year. So it is an expansion of time for the farmers market and also the addition of the artisan market. And I think considering those, it will give you a really good opportunity to see if it has that staying power and how it should and might proceed in the future. So I would like to support it for this year, and I would hope that by the end of the summer you will have a much stronger sense of how it's going and how you'd like it to go forward.
Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Worship. I think when we said this, we would give the pilot project last year, we thought we would do it for a year and see how it worked. And so here we are again, the second year. And so again, I don't think we should be supporting this because I think you need to do the rezoning process so it's clean. Other businesses in this community had to rezone to get their business up and running. I realize it's for the museum, but at the same time, I think what's good for them is good for you.
Thank you. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm just wondering, so if it did happen last year, what happened? Why did we not take it to zoning? Was there something that we... So if it was a special pilot, we didn't move it to zoning. Here we are. They're asking to carry on. I think it would make, it would be diligent to allow them to carry on this year, only this year. As Councillor Patterson has said, let's look at making the motion and reviewing for the zoning change now that we know, and let's keep that on the agenda in front of us so that we do move that forward. So I would support that motion.
Thank you. One of the concerns that I have, I don't have a concern with being supportive, but I would strongly suggest if the vote is to support your request for 2015, that you don't wait until next year this time. I'd come sooner, like December or January, to start talking about rezoning. But in your presentation, you talked about parking, and you talked about parking with the issue in terms of the Chamber of Commerce. I didn't get the impression that that issue had been resolved. Has it been resolved if you get the artisan fair on Sunday?
Your Worship, we've had a meeting with the Chamber, and we have a plan to move forward and ensure that the parking lot does not be an issue for the Chamber of Commerce. The only way we'll know how well that'll work is by doing it. And so there are certain things that we have to do, one with signage, one with marketing, and by having somebody on site with a high visibility vest that will move people along if they're coming in for the wrong purpose.
Would you come back to us, either you or is the Chamber of Commerce here tonight in the audience? I don't know. Yes. Would both of you come back and let us know how that's going, so that that we don't get into any kind of a, for lack of a better term, any kind of a kerfuffle with regards to parking, especially on Sunday?
Absolutely.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Worship. So just to clarify, they're here now. They're saying we'd like to do this, we'd like to move forward, like to rezone. We're saying, why don't you come back in November? Why don't we put this in front of us so that it's on the books, it's on the agenda, and we move forward considering that now rather than waiting till November or January of next year?
Do you want to make an amendment to the motion?
Well, I'm asking for clarification. Okay. Why are we not doing that? I thought that was the
CAO. I mean, we have to vote on the motion that's on the floor, but what your comments?
If I may, Your Worship, I find myself in a bit of a conflict in that this subject was discussed at some length with Council in camera. I'm really not in a position to comment further.
That's a good answer. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. My thinking in response to Councillor Salter, it just seems to me that the Parksville, the Historical Society, can do some homework around what's involved with the request for rezoning and the like, rather than us taking this on right now. And I think it's also understood that it would be best that this come forward sooner rather than later. But the end of the summer or into the fall, they will, I would think, have a very clear idea about how things did go, how to work out the parking and all those things. And I would hope at that time would have a really clear vision as to where they want want this to go, and that would likely be the best time for that to come to council again.
Would an amendment be in order to the motion that that by the end of the season, which would be September, October, that the Historical Society would come back to council to propose discuss the possibility of rezoning? Would that be an acceptable amendment, or is that a new motion?
I guess it depends on the mover and the seconder whether they would deem that as a friendly amendment versus a complete change.
I second it.
Councillor Oates?
So, if I understand it correctly, if we were to go into the rezoning process, this is not like rezoning. Because this is parkland, this would require a referendum.
If I may, Your Worship, for this to be rezoned to the level of providing commercial use, the property would have to, or the current park designation would have to be removed. That can only be done through the assent of the electorate. You have two ways of doing that. One is a referendum. The other one would be the alternate approval process. So there are two ways of doing that. After that is done, then you could go through the rezoning process. You have to be very careful as a council when you're doing that, though, that you're doing it for legitimate land use issues rather than other issues. So you have to be very careful, especially when you're both the applicant and the approving body. So it is a very tricky process when a city is rezoning their own property.
What about, I'll get to you in a moment, what about the fact that I don't see this ever becoming a year-round situation because of the nature of the economy and the tourists and that sort of thing. So would that have any impact when we look at the rezoning? Or could you rezone the property with a caveat that it would only take place, say, 4 months of the year or 5 months of the year?
We're delving into areas of the Director of Community Planning's expertise. I would think that you could create pretty much any zone that you wanted to put together. But again, it has to be based on legitimate land use issues as opposed to meeting some other council priority. And it's, again, you have to be very careful when you're both the applicant and the approving body to do it in accordance with legislation.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I again would just like to suggest that we not worry about the proposal to rezone down the line. I think that we should give the Historical Society an opportunity to do the homework, find out what would be involved, really make it clear, because this request would be coming from them, I presume, if there's a wish to continue with this. And so rather than take up the time here to discuss this, I think that we give them the opportunity to do the homework, to meet with planning as needed, and to get a sense of where they're going and what they want to do in the property. Because there are big implications, I believe, if in fact this piece of property was to come out of parkland, and then what does that leave their society with, et cetera, et cetera.
I think on that note, we're going to call the vote. Yes, CAO.
If I may, Your Worship, probably two things. One is to clarify what the actual motion is, whether it was the original motion or the friendly amendment motion. I would suggest that you go back to the original.
I was going to do that. Yeah.
The second one was, if council so wished, to review or refer the issue to staff to outline the process and the requirements to council, so that at some future date you can consider whether or not you want to go to rezoning or any other option that is available.
Thank you. So we'll deal with the first motion that's on the floor as was presented, that I believe it's the Historical Society be given given the nod to go ahead with the artisan fair and also the farmers market for 2015. The seconder is Councillor Greer. Any further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Now, the next motion would be to refer it to council, to refer it to staff for the study, for the options that council might have with regards to the future rezoning of that property. Does somebody want to make that motion? Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any comments? Okay.
Yes, I'm still just worried that we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with this. That's all I want to say.
So I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, which is to refer to staff to come back with a report. Opposed? That motion's carried. I think. Do that again. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. Sue, you've been waiting patiently. Come on up. And while Sue is getting to the... Thank you, gentlemen, once again for your presentation. While Sue's coming to the microphone, I have to tell you that she's going to tell us about 400 ladies that are coming to Parksville on May 2nd and May 6th, and I'm going to be there. Great. Do you want to sit down, Sue, and speak into the microphone?
Okay, can I show something first before I sit? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, usually you see us dressed like this, you know, with our hats on. But in 3 weeks, we're going to be walking around flashing our shirts. Okay, now we'll sit down. So I sit here. Okay, all right. First of all, I want to thank you all for letting me, I'm not used to this, giving me the opportunity to explain exactly what the LA means to this community. First of all, when you think of the Ladies Auxiliary, you usually think of Branch 49, the Legion, but we kind of think we're the bosses there. We feel we're the backbone. We're the ones that, you know, if we didn't do our work, they wouldn't survive. But of course, they weren't there. We wouldn't have a job to do anyway. We do most of the catering and the memorials for our branches. We have a small canteen, which we operate twice a week for bingo. We feel that we help the families in this community from the time that you have your children through sickness by donating to the foundation at the Nanaimo Hospital. And when we get a little bit further on with our kids, we do breakfasts at the elementary school. And then when your children even get to the senior high, we're there with special, let's see, what's the word I want here? I've lost my spot. But with what? Bursaries, thank you very much. And scholarships in the medical programs. We work around doing everything in this community. And I would like to mention some of the things we do donate to. And one is Honor House, Wounded Warriors. We do things for our own Legion too. We buy tables and dishwashers and that. And we do donate to the Cancer Society, Search and Rescue, Cadets, all 3 units, the Little Brownie, Sparks, Salvation Army, Parkinson's Society. And of course, when our work is all done on Earth, we need hospice, and we support that. The Therapeutic Riding School, and Cops for Cancer. I'm not going to need 10 minutes to say all this. I'm very proud of the ladies. We were hoping for 400, but our numbers are down, and we think it's the ferry fares. We're pretty sure that we are all seniors, and that really hurts us. So we're down to just about 300. And I would like that everybody welcome these people, these ladies that come. They're supporting our community. They are in the hotels. They are in the restaurants. They are supporting also Bowser and Qualicum. And I hope when you guys see them, all of you, you give them a wave, thank them for what they do. And that's the end of my statement. Thank you.
So I gather the number is at least 400?
It's down. It's down now because... 300? Yeah, about 300 now.
They're coming from all over?
All over British Columbia.
All over British. That's great. That's great.
And I know these ladies are great because I am the president of Branch 49 also, and they support us very well. So thank you again.
That's wonderful. And I personally want to thank you for inviting me to the Robbie Burns supper. And the Highland dancers, the kids that were doing the Highland dancing were just fantastic.
It was nice to get to know you on that personal basis. And
yeah. I wonder if council would allow me. Yes, Councillor Oates.
I'd like to make a motion, actually. Move that the City of Parksville write a letter to the Ladies Auxiliary, welcoming them to Parksville for their convention and wishing them every success at their event.
Ladies Auxiliary. Sir.
For your worship, isn't it the Royal Canadian Legion
Yes, it is.
Auxiliary? Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Oates knew that. He just misspoke. I wonder if council would allow me, while Sue is still here, I was going to do it under new business, but I think it's much more appropriate if I did it now. And under new business, I was going to have the proclamation of volunteer week rather, which is coming up. Help me here, Miss Sirs. 12th to 18th of April. And if, with your permission, Council, I'd like to read this now because Ms. Hodges is here and I want her to hear it. And it's all about volunteers. Any objection? Do I need a motion? No? Okay. Pardon me?
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor.
Oh, to send the letter. All those in favor? Oh, that's... Okay. So here we go. And Sue, I'm going to dedicate this to you and your group while you're here. Whereas volunteerism in the City of Parksville plays a vital role in strengthening society, creating a sense of cohesion and unity across the City of Parksville, and whereas 13.3 million Canadian volunteers give their time to help others, contributing 2.1 billion volunteer hours per year, and whereas volunteers in Parksville are recognized as an important partner with government and industry in providing service to citizens, and whereas volunteers of all ages from all walks of life and backgrounds give generously of their talent, energy, and their time to assist individuals and families in the community, to mentor our children, feed our hungry, comfort our lonely, beautify our green spaces, and fundraise for our charitable organizations. And whereas more than 1,000 Parksville citizens contribute to the quality of life of their community using their talents and resources to address some of the major issues facing our community, and whereas the collective result of the work done by our city's volunteers is that Parksville is a more desirable place to live, to work, and to play. Now, therefore, I, Mark Lefebvre, Mayor, on behalf of City Council, hereby proclaim April 12th to 18th, 2015 as Volunteer Week in the City of Parksville and urge my fellow citizens to recognize the crucial role played by volunteers in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's a proclamation. Yeah. Okay. You have something to say? You can say something. You go right ahead.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Legion's Auxiliary, Women's Auxiliary, because, you know, when my mom passed away in Quesnel, we used the Women's Auxiliary for her tea and memorial, and it was, you know, it couldn't have been better. And I think oftentimes women who are behind the scenes, and you don't really see them, like our fire department, their wives, they couldn't do their job without their wives. And I think the same is true for the Union, the Legion, pardon me. I think that the Legion wouldn't be what it is without women in the auxiliary to do the work that you do. And you do it quietly. Unless you come to council and do a presentation, we don't really know what you do. And so it's really helpful for us as a council to understand how you work within that Legion, and I want to thank you very much for the work that you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
said, Councillor Powell. Thank you. Moving on with the agenda, we are now on item number 4 under reports. Mayor and Council Advisory Planning Commission. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any comments, observations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. I'm pausing because I see there's a thing here for the streamlining to pause for 3 to 5 seconds. So I better pause. Next, we have item 4B. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the consideration of a development permit, 115 McMillan Street? Where did everybody go? They're all gone home.
If I may, Your Worship, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr.
If I may, Your Worship, the city has received a development permit application for an 18-unit apartment complex on McMillan Street. The property was recently rezoned for this purpose, which was an amendment to an existing zone for a similar type building. In this case, the principal review is for the architectural form and character, landscape screening, as well as some sustainability guidelines. Staff have reviewed the proposal and are of the opinion that it meets the general objectives of the guidelines. Flip through some plans. These were in the agenda package. This is an excerpt, but they may show up a little bit better in color on the screen. Some renderings of the street views, what it would actually look like kind of from the street. Some shadow maps. This shows the landscape, streetscape concepts. That's just some other elevation drawings. That's just some detail of some of the finer works. I'll just go back to one of the renderings to kind of. There you go. Yeah, that's probably better. So the recommendation is as per the agenda.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. Questions, comments? Councillor, I'm going to go to Councillor Greer first, and then Councillor Powell, and then Councillor Beale.
Just a quick comment. I think this is going to really improve that area, and I'm hoping they'll start this year. I don't know whether they will or not, but it's going to be a really great improvement, and I think it's a great development. Thanks.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 25 of the report, 4th paragraph down, it says staff is of the opinion that the project's architect and landscape architect teams have designed a proposal that appears to be in general compliance. Do I hear a but there?
If I may, Your Worship, I don't believe you hear a but there, but council is ultimately, I guess it sounded bad, didn't it? Council is ultimately aware of whether or not these things in the balance have met the guidelines, not staff. Staff provide a professional opinion, but it's ultimately Council's decision on whether or not the application has fully achieved those guidelines. So if I was more definitive, that would actually may limit your ability to disagree with that opinion.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too was very impressed with the proposal that's been put forward, and I particularly want to note the inclusion of infrastructure for future solar panel installation, which looks great. I learned from reading this that highway does not necessarily mean highways, but it could mean any road, public road, so that was interesting for me. I also noted it's just a very, very thorough, it seems a very thorough presentation, very complete. Nice to see the rooftop garden proposal, just a number of very nice features. In fact, I briefly considered, well, maybe I don't need so much backyard space, and maybe I should think about something like this. But anyway, it was very nice. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Oates?
Yes, thank you very much. And I believe that the application before us does meet the development permit guidelines, and the information that's been provided is sufficient enough for us to grant that development permit, and I would be supporting that.
Thank you. I just wanted to make two observations on page 29. I got kind of, I won't use the word excited, but I got kind of excited. There's a development to include infrastructure for future solar panel installation, and I thought that that's a real step in the right direction. And I was also really impressed with the communal gardens are provided on rooftops. I don't think we have that anywhere in Parksville, do we? Yet? That's a first, is it not?
If I may, Your Worship, I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Russell, once again, would you please give us the background on the consideration of a development permit for 826 Island Highway West?
If I may, Your Worship, there are two components to the specific development permit. This is, again, primarily upgrades to Wembley Mall. For the main portion of the mall, it's really a fairly extensive facade upgrade, so exterior improvement to the mall building itself, as well as a reorganization of the space to basically turn it into what I would call a plaza-type development. Other people might use other terms, but you'd basically drive up to the stores with exterior access rather than an internal main shopping corridor. And that's sort of a trend that you'll probably noticed in some smaller shopping centers have moved that way in the region. So that's a fairly extensive change. The biggest probably improvement is really the back side of the mall, which will now have some pretty a face to it rather than just a bleak kind of space. So I think it's a fairly major improvement in staff's opinion to the shopping center. These are just the elevation drawings. I think the renderings are a bit easier to kind of perceive, but these are the architectural drawings. There are some enhancements to part of the parking in the immediate vicinity of the shopping center. This plan is the landscape plan. It shows in a little bit more detail. Zoomed in a bit further. And then this is a zoom in of what the rendering, sort of the 3D rendering would appear for the entire complex. The other aspect of it is the Canadian Tire building, which has an approved development permit. Often when they get to the building permit stage, there's some minor adjustments that need to be made. And in this case, this just sort of shows the original organization of the internal part of the building. They've subsequently shifted things just a little bit, and the main thing is primarily somewhere where their office space is. But as a result, it's changed some of the exterior of the building. So this elevation, probably the front is here, and this is the side. That was the original proposal. The changes themselves, I'll kind of try to flip back between them, but they've added an additional bay, and they've reconfigured this a little bit, and some of the glazing's being shifted on the main building, but overall it's still, if I do this you can kind of see, it's generally, overall it's still principally the same, and the back hasn't really changed a lot. It's still primarily a loading area, and that, again, that's what it would look like in the entire mall project.
To get this thing on the discussion, mover and seconder, moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Oates. Discussion. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to say that I really appreciate the facade, the proposed facade upgrades, and the landscaping improvements on the Wembley Road side will be really fantastic improvement to the look of the mall. However, I actually want to speak against this motion for one reason. I just would like to see something attended to that I don't see at present. I feel, in my opinion, that the development proposal does not fully meet the guidelines for landscaping and screening in the development permit guidelines, and in particular item 2C, which states that landscape pedestrian walkways should be provided to and from buildings and parking areas. I would like to see an accessible pedestrian pathway through the landscaped area. And actually, if you were able to go back to page 72 from our package, hang on, there, I think, yes, that would do. So at the southwest corner, which of that, yes, if you, thank you very much, Mr. Russell, that's very helpful. At the southwest corner, which is adjacent to Wembley Road, to have a pedestrian pathway that would effectively link through from Wembley Road through to that parking lot, for instance. Now, actually, I've been by there, and that parking lot has designated pedestrian walkways through the parking lot, which would then allow people to access the mall. I just want to add that Wembley Road is an identified bicycle route, and it has recently been given approval for upgrades to improve pedestrian and cycling safety. And I believe that providing an accessible pathway at the southwest corner of the property would link Wembley Road and the mall. It would provide safer and a more pleasing egress to the mall, and it will be of particular benefit to nearby area residents and also to students who are traveling along Wembley Road from Oceanside Elementary School. And I actually noted that there already is a beaten path in place connecting right through that corner. So I think the feet have voted, and I would like to see that in place before approving this proposal. Otherwise, I think it looks great.
Mr. Russell?
If I may, Your Worship, that is entirely Council's decision. If the majority of Council can refuse the issuance of a permit provided a specific guideline is named and the specific changes to the proposal are put forward so that the proponent can address those issues.
Yes, Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell, if this was defeated because of this, would you anticipate that there would be much of a delay for the developer in order to look at this and bring it back to Council?
If I may, Your Worship, as soon as they would have us a revised plan, we would put it on the next available Council agenda for reconsideration.
We have a motion on the floor. Councillor Owen?
So, Councillor Beale's opinion is that it doesn't meet the guidelines, but staff's opinion is that it does?
If I may, Your Worship, staff's opinion is that it meets the general intent of the guidelines. Ultimately, Council is the measuring device on how many pedestrian walkways meet the guidelines to Council's satisfaction. I'm not in a position to determine that. It's ultimately Council, the majority of Council's prerogative. There are. This plan doesn't show it, but there are access, there's sidewalks here, there is an entrance here that has bollards that is a pedestrian entrance, but whether that is to the satisfaction of Council, only Council can say.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I haven't got a problem with this, and I hate to think that we're going to hold such a development up for another month or maybe 2 months. And I think it's such a small item, and I can't see a problem with it. So I would like to go ahead with our vote on this and get it through as fast as we can. We've been waiting many, many years for this. I'd like to see it happen quickly. Thanks.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. My understanding is that the delay might be as little as 2 weeks. But perhaps it could be more involved in that. I did have a look at where the sidewalk, for instance, goes down into the rear behind Wembley Mall. But the problem with that, as I see it, well, one of the problems is it leads into effectively the loading bay. And I don't think that that's really where we want to be directing pedestrian traffic. And one of our goals, as stated in the official community plan, is to look at ways to improve pedestrian access. If we want people to be able to walk to the store, that sort of thing, I think we need to consider it. And the pedestrian access in some cases, it is not the safest or most pleasant to put it alongside the vehicular access. This is a very small spot that we're talking about, and I think if the developer could have a look at it, it could be very easily fixed, I would hope.
Mr. Russell, how receptive, in your opinion, would the proponent be to do this after the fact? It's maybe not a fair question.
Yeah, I don't feel I can speak on behalf of the proponent. I just want to make one point of clarification. When we really look at, a site, we look at what areas they are changing. So in this case, they're changing this existing parking area and just the outside of the building, not the entire lot. So that's kind of the scope that we are looking at it from. But again, council isn't bound by that scope. And in the grand scheme of things, and given the size of the overall project, a sidewalk one way or the other, I don't think is a deal breaker. But again, I can't speak for the proponent.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Blaine. I think I agree with Councillor Beale. This is going to be a long-term. I think we need to start looking at the future of this city. And if we do it now, we won't have to do it later. We won't have to go by there and think, geez, we should have done this. And it makes complete sense to me. I never noticed it when I looked at it, but I think it's well worthwhile to send back. And I think you could develop really nice walkways in there. So I won't be supporting this as it is.
Any further comments? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Salter.
So has the cement been poured into the back already? Is that path already leading back into the back wall?
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Slater. This parking lot here is existing. Right now, this is trees and brambles and grass. This is the revised parking area that they're going to re-landscape and repave. But this is all existing here.
Councillor Beale, one more time.
Thank you. Just to clarify for people who maybe haven't visited the site itself, when I did go by the existing parking lot that Mr. Russell has pointed out, there is quite a division in the double parking area that's in the middle there. If you can put your cursor on that, Mr. Russell, that area actually has a very wide space between those parking stalls that is obviously meant as a walkway, and it links directly to a painted crosswalk that leads right down to an access at the back. So it's actually would be less involved than I originally thought to address this.
Okay, the vote on the motion is to approve this this particular proposal. So all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That motion is defeated. Do you want to make another motion? Would it be appropriate, Mr. Russell, to make a motion, if the council make a motion on the recommendation by Councillor Beale?
Your Worship, I believe that would be the case.
Okay, Councillor Beale?
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to refer this back to staff. Is that how we would do that, to meet with the developer to address the particular concern regarding pedestrian access from Wembley Road on the southwest corner?
Seconded by Councillor Oates. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, thank you, Mr. Russell. Next, we have Mr. Squire. The Craig Street Merchants request for additional street furnishings. Mr. Squire, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Your Worship,
I'm sorry. Oh, yes.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to
Thank you.
excuse myself.
We'll see you later.
Thank you.
We'll go get you when it's over.
So thank you, Your Worship. As you're aware, the Craig Street Merchants has brought forward a request to enhance the street appeal of the area with the addition of various downtown standard street furnishings in an interim effort prior to the capital works upgrade of Craig Street. Currently, the capital works for Craig Street aren't until year 2022, and currently don't involve any street furnishings other than the hard infrastructure, such as storm, underground infrastructure replacement, and the surface treatment, which would be sidewalks, roads, and street lighting. On February 5th, 2015, staff met with Mr. Barry Evans and Shelley Atwood on site to further review their proposal, confirm the scope of work, and obtain additional information. The specific requests from the Craig Street merchants are the construction of an archway at the north end of Craig Street, the replacement of the existing plastic self-watering planters with downtown-style watering planters to supply additional downtown-style benches, and the city to provide crosswalk improvements at the intersection of Craig Street and Middleton Avenue, and the city to supply additional garbage cans in the area, similar to those on Alberni, and improve the existing street lighting within the area. City approvals for murals and artwork in locations. As part of BC Hydro works to improve safety with conflicts with overhead power lines and trees, 3 trees in Craig Street were removed by BC Hydro and will be replaced, have been determined to be replaced through operations with 2 downtown self-watering style planters. As part of recommendations from the 2014 Municipal Insurance Association report, included funding for installation. Our budget currently includes funding for installation of 1 new style combination bench and self-watering planter at the back of the sidewalk to prevent vehicles from entering the vacant lot at the north end of Craig Street. Regarding the crosswalk improvements on Craig Street and Middleton Avenue, operations with engineering's help, we're already planning on upgrading the pedestrian letdowns and crosswalks in this area as part of the recommendations from the 2014 Municipal Insurance Report. We also looked at the existing street lighting in the area and has determined that they're degrading due to the aging yellow lenses, and operations will put a request into BC Hydro to replace those 2 lenses.
Just before I call for a mover and a seconder, in the options that you talk, some of these things are going to get done, as you mentioned in your report. So it's not quite to receive the report. Then it just as a matter of clarity, the report would be for staff to proceed with what you're proposing to do.
If I may, Your Worship, this report is for information, so I'm bringing forward information from the merchants' requests. And with that, I'm also providing you with the operational functions that we'll be doing on the Craig Street.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have, to open this up for discussion, do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Greer. Discussion on the report. Councillor Oates.
So if I understand it correctly, these things are going to happen whether or not we receive this report, right? These are things that are in the works that you are planning because of the discussions with BC Hydro and the insurance group and that. So we're just receiving the report, and we're not authorizing anything additional other than what has been planned and budgeted for.
Any further questions? I look upon this as a start of a small start in terms of downtown revitalization. I have a question. There are no, between Island Highway 19A and Hearst and Jensen, there are no benches. That's correct? There are no benches on Craig Street whatsoever. There's benches on Craig Street between Jensen and Stanford. Okay. So when you looked at the ability or the availability or of benches, did you not see a need there, or would there be a place for benches in that area?
If I may, Your Worship, right now we just see the need for 1 bench currently at the north end. Right now, it's at Council's discretion to direct direct staff to, if sought to.
The other thing that, for council's information, I had a discussion with with some of the executive of the PDBA, and I am told that with regards to the crosswalks, the painting of the crosswalks and that sort of thing, the PDBA are going to have that money in their budget to do that this year. And that's something that will more than likely get done. The logo, I guess, is being worked on. I'm looking just for a nod. The logo has been determined in terms of what that would look like, and then that would be painted on the crosswalks on Craig. Okay, so you'll work with the city on that. Okay. Personally, I know we've got a mover and a seconder, but I would personally like to propose that we would add at least 2 more benches. The self-style watering planters. Who waters the planters now? The city or the merchants?
Yes, they're ordered through the city and maintained by the city.
Is there any way of modifying the planters that are there that they become self-watering, or that needs another type of planter?
The existing planters there are the plastic type. The aesthetics, I believe, aren't to the standard of the downtown, so those were put there as an interim measure. There was, I believe, 4 years ago, there was some trees in front of the North End merchants on the west side. Again, those planters were there to replace the trees and sort of an interim measure into those full capital works to replace the infrastructure in place.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Beale, and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am wondering, through to Mr. Squires, if city staff have identified any other good locations on Craig Street for benches. I'm thinking about that street. The sidewalks are fairly narrow, etc. Although I too would like to see perhaps at least one more bench, and I'm wondering if the southeast corner, although staff could decide, but the southeast corner where Middleton meets Craig Street, maybe there would be space there, but otherwise I don't see a lot of space there for benches. And perhaps staff could advise otherwise.
Any further comments from members of council? Councillor Powell, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I did go up Craig Street, and I think there's either between 6 and 8 garbage cans already on that street. I also went down Jensen, Harrison, Morrison. There's no garbage cans on those streets. There's no benches on those streets. And I understand that the PDBA covers the area between McMillan, I believe, and down to Corfield. And I understand that Craig Street feels that they need beautification, but they have to understand that they're in a queue with the rest of the downtown area. And it seems to me that there are things that can be done on Craig Street that the business owners can do. There's facade upgrades, there's painting. The person that lives on Jensen or has a business on Jensen painted their building pink, and her business has increased exponentially. And so my frustration is, you know, the PDBA represents the whole downtown core. And what about Wells Street? There's no sidewalks all the way down Wells Street. There certainly isn't a bench down Wells Street. And so we have to look at it holistically. And so Craig Street, I think, has 6 to 8 garbage cans. I'm not sure how many benches. We're going to put another bench in there. The planters could do with some work. Is it high on our priority list? I'm sorry, I don't think so. There's other streets in the downtown area that I think take priority. So I'm not going to support this.
Further comments? I just wanted to, I don't quite agree with Councillor Powell. I think that the whole issue of downtown revitalization has got to start, and it's got to start now. And if council approves this report, to receive the report and the work that will get done, at least that's a start. I'll talk later under new business about further reviewing the issue of downtown revitalization and how we're going to do that. But I think at some point in time, and if I get any comment about a priority in Parksville, it's always do something about the downtown. The downtown is tired, it's old, and it needs to be refurbished and refreshed. I know that the building owners have got to step up to the plate and look at that, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think that this is an issue that, for me, during my term as mayor, is not going to go away, because I think downtown revitalization is very, very important. Councillor Rhodes.
Just for clarity, again, if this motion is voted for in the affirmative, or if it's voted in the negative, the upgrades that are proposed and planned and budgeted for this year are happening regardless. Okay. So if we wanted to do any additional upgrades to address the concerns that the Craig Street merchants specifically asked for when they came to council, we would have to pass a motion to provide those extra planters or benches. So voting yea or nay on this particular motion does not affect what the plan is for this year for Craig Street. We could, if we wanted to, put forward an additional motion after this, which would augment that work, which is going to happen regardless of how the first motion.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Powell, Councillor Beale, and then Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. I would like Council to keep in mind that we have limited resources. We're going through the budget process, and I think if we're going to spend money on one street as opposed to the rest of the streets, I don't think that's doing the Downtown Business Association due respect. It's not Craig Street is a busy street. It has the Tuesday street market there through the summer. A lot of business goes in there. We have other businesses on Morrison who have concerns about what the city has done to upgrade their streets. The same with Harrison. There's a lot of businesses that we have not paid any attention to. And so with limited dollars, I'm just saying caution, because we can't give everybody the moon, and we have to spend our dollars wisely. And so that's why I don't support any more money going towards, other than the repairs that staff is going to do anyways. And I think we need to look at the whole downtown area, not just Craig Street.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted for clarification that the motion before us is, am I correct in thinking it's just to receive this report at this time? Thank you.
So, I guess we're going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. And I think that, echoing what Councillor Powell said, I think it's time that we start looking at all the other streets also and getting ourselves a plan. But I'll talk about that later under new business. Would somebody ask Councillor Patterson to come back, please? The next item is yours again, Mr. Squire. Could you please give us the background on the issue regarding the community park washroom facility upgrade?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. On November 3rd, 2014, at a regular meeting at Council, they authorized staff to proceed with the detailed drawings for building permit and construction. The project will include a complete renovation of the existing washroom facility. That will include roof line adjustments, Celestria windows added to improve natural lighting, removal of the concession from the building and provide 2 additional family-style washrooms, additional stalls to the men's and women's washrooms, building facade upgrade with slate veneer, LED lighting upgrades, new plumbing fixtures, new quartz flooring, and new bathroom stalls. Provisions were made for future solar panels and future gray water reuse. And also the addition of a water bottle fill station would be added down at the concession. Tender packages were obtained by Agnias Builders Limited, Built Contracting, Murphy Contracting Limited, and Saywell Contracting on March 26, 2015. Staff has reviewed and evaluated the bids and determined the low bidder meets all the requirements. The lowest bidder is a local contractor, and the city's purchasing policy number 6.14 requires council approval for projects over a value of $100,000 is required. The following 4 bids were opened in public on Thursday, March 26, 2015, and have been found to be complete, and all costs include 5% GST. The project the completion of the project is scheduled to be in the, and it is in the contract for June 30th, 2015. And my recommendation is to go with the low bidder.
Thank you. In order to get this on the board, can I please have a mover and a seconder for this recommendation? Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any discussion? Councillor Salter and Councillor Greer.
So, I just find this really rich for bathrooms. I built a house for less than this, 3 bedrooms, 2,000 square feet, and these are bathrooms and they're being upgraded. We're not changing the plumbing. The plumbing's already in place. The bathrooms are there. They're being renovated. I just find this really, really high. And knowing that we're have limited resources and we need to be cautious with our spending, I'm wondering if we couldn't look at finding something a little less costly here. We're looking at $300,000 for some toilets. I got to say, we just put up a toilet on an island. It was $500. It's a composting toilet.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. I have the same thought as our councillor who just spoke. You can buy a lot and build a two-bedroom, 3-bedroom house for $300,000. So I have a concern about the price. However, my biggest concern is that every time we seem to go out for tender, we have a contingency of 10%. And in the real world where I come from, I would like a firm price when I went out for anything. And this just gives the ability of the developer to add another $30,000. And I think we should be very, very sure that these people can do the project at the $303,000 without saying, well, if you can't do it, there's another 10% for you. I don't think good businesses run that way. And I've done a lot of building and so on, and I've never had any clauses like that. They had to build exactly the cost of what they said they were going to bill for and have it completed at the right time. So I have trouble with the 30% or the 10%, which is another $30,000.
Mr. Squire, in your report, you said that this project will maintain the facility for the next 20 to 30 years. And what kind of an impact did that have on the price in terms of what the quality of the work that's going on there? Would you care to comment on that?
Yes, if I may, Your Worship. This is a commercial grade installation. And in saying so, that's what the price reflects. We did, this is an industry standard. We did consult with the architect before to make sure we had the proper budgets that were in line with this. And yes, based on the square footage, it certainly does seem a lot of money, but it is the demand. You have to have commercial grade appliances or fixtures, that are vandal proof, and they're not cheap. The water bottle fill station alone, because it's on the exterior, and it's a drinking fountain as well, needs to be completely vandal proof and demands a high dollar for that as well. This type of infrastructure right now, it's sort of a 20, 30-year lifespan is what we're looking at.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank
you. Yes, Your Worship. In regards to pretty much the same subject, as Council is aware, the concession building in the park has been reconfigured to be just change rooms and washrooms. The concession that was in it at Council's direction, has been removed to mobile pads. This report is in regards to the request for proposal for those mobile pads. 2 proposals were received in response to the city's request. The annual proposed rental revenues range between $3,095 and $9,500. Based on the quality of the proposals and the rental revenue offered, staff is recommending Council accept the proposal from Trollers Fish and Chips and re-advertise a request for proposal for the second mobile food pad, and staff's recommendation is as per the agenda.
Greer, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any comments, Councillor Greer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering the difference on the pad rates. One is considerably lower than the other. How is that being judged?
If I may, Your Worship, these are submissions that were made to the city. These are the proposed rental amounts that the 2 proponents were going to give to the city. They came up with those rates themselves. That was of concern to staff when we reviewed it. The big range between the 2, it didn't give us comfort as to what the actual market value was as outlined in the report.
Right. And how does the person feel that's got the high bid? Or do they know yet what the other bid is? I mean, there's got to be some kind of parity involved here.
Well, as I indicated in the report, you know, that much disparity in the bids made us wonder which or what really is the market value of those. I can't tell you. This is what we received.
So in another year, we might know better and maybe to establish a fairer price between pads?
Well, it may even be sooner than a year. By accepting the one bid and re-advertising the other one, we may get more bids at either the $3,000 range or the $9,500 range, which will tell us what the real market value is.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship, to our CAO. So at present, these 2 pads will be operational for the 2015 season, summer season?
If I may, Your Worship, the intent, or that is the intent. They either are constructed right now or under construction right now and will be in place for the 2015 summer. By approving the recommendation as it is right now, you would be accepting the bid from Trollers Fish and Chips. The other part of the recommendation would be to advertise again for the second pad. As outlined in the report, it's reasonable to expect that through the request for proposal process and the award, that the second pad could be in operation mid to end of June.
Just to follow up, Your Worship. We talked about having additional pads. Would that be looked at in years to come? Is that the plan on as the interest is shown?
Right now, we've constructed 2 pads. As public demand, I guess, directs, and requests are made to Council for additional pads, that would be something that Council would have to consider in the future. The more pads that you get, of course, could affect the amount of bids that we get, because there is only so much demand, and if the supply is there, you'll drop the demand.
Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So help me remember this. Do the trucks come out of the park every night, or do they stay down there locked up?
If I may, Your Worship, the way the proposal is placed right now, they would have to be removed each night.
Okay. And does Troller have a truck? It looks like they don't have one yet.
They are proposing an 18-foot trailer.
Okay, and are they covered by the health authority?
Everything
All
would
their
be
licensing,
everything
is
would
it
be in accordance
appropriate?
with VHA regulations, whatever other regulations are there.
And they're in Nanaimo and Courtney?
Currently, they have an operation in Nanaimo and an operation in Courtney.
Are they from here? You don't know?
I don't know.
Councillor Oates.
I'd like to move the recommendations as on page 121 of our package, specifically that the report from the CAO dated March 25th entitled Community Park Food Vendors be received, that Community Park Food Vendor proposal received from Trollers Fish and Chips, including a monthly pad rental of $1,900, be accepted, and that staff be directed to re-advertise the request for mobile food vendor proposals for the second mobile food vendor pad.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to say that for the record, I will likely support this motion, but I'm not totally comfortable with it. Just thinking about the restaurants nearby and just that whole situation with our downtown, the Parksville downtown area. I think the idea of food trucks they can really add a lot to the flavor and ambiance of the community, but to have something that maybe would be different from what is available nearby would be desirable.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. To our CAO, can you tell me how much it costs to do a pad in the park?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
No.
Do you have any idea of what that would be?
Yeah, currently what we're doing, we're constructing the pads, and in conjunction with that, we're fixing some of the drainage issues and problems down at the community park as well. So it's two project parts, but approximately it's around between $15,000 and $20,000 for the actual pad itself, the pad area, for the two.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So one of the things I have a concern with, as Councillor Beale mentioned, is the competition with downtown, the PDBA and the different restaurants downtown. We have this fish and chip place just down off on Morrison. The other thing is I would prefer to have community, somebody from our community in the park, not somebody from Courtney or Nanaimo. You know, we're trying to do economic development, and we're going to see dollars leave our community. So I'm not going to support this.
CAO, just a comment on when do we go out for RFPs? Can we restrict, what's the limit we can restrict the area of competition?
If I may, Your Worship, when it is a request for proposal, I believe that you can put whatever restrictions for the proposal that you want. It does, of course, limit the types of proposals that you'll get.
Did we get any proposals from the downtown businesses or the city of Parksville? Anybody? Did we get any? Can staff answer that question? We got two?
We only got two as outlined in the report.
Okay. Councillor Salter.
So 15 to 20,000 per pad? Is it? Sorry, through the CAO?
That's correct, but that also includes the supply of water, gray water, and power.
So the city is promoting a restaurant or food vendors in the park by providing the area for them to park on because we're paying for it, and then they're going to rent it back from us at $3,000 to $9,000 per year, for $1,900 per month, at a revenue of $3,000 to $9,500. Is that right?
That's correct.
So we're almost So we're almost competing with the restaurants uptown. Are we? Is that?
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Salter, just keeping in mind that there has been an existing concession providing food in the park for many years now. They are being, moved out due to the renovations to the washroom area. So yes, there is an expansion, but to some degree, this is simply a substitution and a relocation of a food business.
Councillor Powell, Councillor Greer after that, and then I'm going to have the final say and we're going to call the vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the CAO. And so you only had 2 applications, but wasn't there some concern that it wasn't really advertised in a lot of different ways? Because I know there's a lot of food trucks in Parksville. And so wasn't there some issue with that the local vendors were questioning?
If I may, Your Worship, as outlined in the report, the tender or the request for proposal was issued, I believe, on February the 10th, sent out to BC Bid and a local, or not a local, provincial-wide industrial magazine. I'm not reading the report, it's in the report. On February the 11th, we notified the 2 newspapers, the Oceanside, or the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association, the Chamber of Commerce, and the radio that the proposal had gone out. We were unable to verify one way or another whether or not the newspapers had included anything with regards to that in any of their publications, but we were able to verify that 88.5, the radio, did in fact advertise the fact that the request for proposal was issued. It's our intent with this next round, if this motion is approved, that we would advertise in the local papers, and we would also provide the request for proposal to the Parksville Downtown Business Association so that they can make sure that it is received as well. And further to answer to your question, yes, we did get one comment from a local food vendor that they and other people that they had talked to had not received notification that the request for proposal was issued.
Councillor Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm certainly in favor of the motion. A year ago, with the other council, we had, this was put to us, and the other alternative, rather than the pads, was to expand the concession, which, if it had been expanded, then they might have got into the fish and chips and everything else as well. So it's hard to say that no one's ever going to compete with the places uptown. It's important that we have enough food when there's large activities going on in the park that they're serviced well. So it was an option we faced, and rather than make the present stand larger and compete more, we decided to make more washrooms and make the pads. Thanks.
Well, a final comment from me, and following up on the CAO's comments a few moments ago. Yeah, I definitely think that the park is within the BIA, and I think that it's very important that we include the PDBA, as perhaps the Chamber of Commerce also, or as well as the Chamber of Commerce, and coming up with, if this motion is going to pass, and coming up with a way to make sure that everybody gets a chance to know about the RFP and gets a copy of it, and that's a great way to do that through the PDBA and through the Chamber of Commerce. So on that final comment, seeing no other comments, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the 3 motions? Opposed? That motion carries. Those motions carry. Thank you. Okay. Pausing for 3 to 5 seconds. New business. Is there any items under new business? Do you have anything under new business, Councillor Patterson? Because we're going to start. Okay, we'll start on that end and we'll work our way around. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be letting council know a little bit more information in regards to the Oceanside Accessibility Organization and their, can you help me with the
Wheel Walkabout?
Wheel Walkabout, which will be taking place in May. And they also have a fundraiser that I think you're away for, Your Worship, but you're going to speak to? Okay. On that. So that was that. But I do have a question to our CAO, and that, if at all possible at this time. We had a report from RMS, and that was part of a report that I left the room for, but I don't feel that it should have been included, and I'd like to revisit it. So I'm not sure if that's possible or not. No?
Would you repeat that? I didn't quite get what you were asking for.
Well, I brought this survey and that up with our accessibility, Oceanside accessibility, and there was a lot of issues, and I was hoping to comment on it, and that tonight.
You had to recluse yourself. Oh, I see. Yeah.
So I would really hope that we can pull this back out from Craig.
I would
Craig
suggest
Street.
you go to staff with that. I think that Mr. Vic Figueroa, as a member, shows up at the committee. That would be a good place to bring it.
And that's so.
Okay. Is that it? Councillor Salter.
Sorry, I have two motions. So I'd like to make the first motion after years of attempts to promote Plan A on the water treatment plant and aquifer storage and at least $5 million spent. I think it's long overdue that Council invite the community to assist Council with their expertise in establishing a Plan B, C, and D, each of which is independent of the other, so not all the same. In this, we may take the time frames imposed by VHA. We might make those time frames, and perhaps at less than $40 million. And I must say it's notable that Mr. Wicks did tonight provide some alternatives to Plan A, and I'd like to request that staff investigate the feasibility of some of these possibilities.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just finding that there was a lot in that motion, so what I'm hearing is that we're inviting the public and also making a request to staff. So I just wanted to understand if those 2 points are both part of the motion, or if it might be better to separate those.
So the clarification is that at this point we have one plan, Plan A, and so my motion is let's get Plan B, C, and D going rather than just having a Plan A. So we don't have anything other than one plan. And I think it would be due diligent to come up with other options that we don't have. And I just added that it's notable that, it's fortunate that this evening we actually heard some other options from a community member, but that staff could start looking at other options and possible other costs so that we can get moving on this.
Councillor Oates.
So I'm still not clear what the motion is. So I believe what you said in your motion is you wanted option A. We had option A. You wanted B, C, and D. So if we approve this motion, we would have to get 3 options for consideration. And that's enough. 3. So you're looking for 3 more options in addition to the ones we have.
Yeah, I'm looking for other options in addition to what we have. If it's 2 options, that's better than what we've got. If it's 3, that's even better. Whatever we can come up with. I think the community needs to be involved in this. They haven't. And I think that we need to listen to them. And I think we need to actually investigate some of these other options. And we haven't done that. All we've done is dismiss them. So we need to investigate and we need to come up with other options because Plan A is on hold. So we can't stay on hold. We know that. We know we've got VHA telling us that this has to be in place. It's not in place. We don't know when it's going to be in place. And it would be diligent for us now to recognize where we're at, which is we're in a holding pattern. We've got DFO. We've got no money. We don't have any money coming in from grants. This isn't hard to see what's going on here. We're kind of stuck. So it's time for us to move on and to stop carrying forward with blinders on. We've got to start looking elsewhere, and we haven't done to this point. The motion is let's look at other options.
From my experience sitting on the ERWS, a number of things that Mr. Wicks brought up tonight were considered and studied and not accepted in terms of a long-term supply of potable water. And you heard Mr. Wicks admit that, you know, the minute you talk about surface water, the water's got to be treated anyway. So you need a treatment plant. That's not debatable. I would question your comment that the project is on hold. Staff, I was going to talk about this under new business in my item, but I'll bring it up now. Staff have met last week with Fisheries and Oceans. Those negotiations are going well. And this is part and parcel of the to and fro that goes on with a project of the importance and magnitude of this particular project. With regards to the money, we have an application in for the money. We know we're going to get some money. We don't know how much money we're going to get. So that's the situation there. So to say it's on hold, it's not really on hold. It's moving forward. There's a number of parts that have to be completed. Those parts aren't completed yet. But what I heard from Mr. Wicks this evening, in my opinion, he admitted it himself. He was throwing some suggestions forward. I would see probably, given the report that Mr. Wicks left with us, perhaps the proper thing to do would be to ask staff to have a look at some of those recommendations and report back on what consideration they were given over the last couple of years as we came to the conclusion that the solution that we've now found is the solution for our long-term potable water problems that we're going to have in Parksville.
And so for a follow-up, that staff or someone's come to the conclusion that it doesn't work, it doesn't actually work for me, and this is why. There isn't anybody sitting here who's an expert. None of us are. And number one. And number two, whether it's ideas that have come from Mr. Wicks or whether it's ideas that have come from some other person who's got another idea, that's regardless. We need to look at other ideas. We know that DFO put us on a 2-year hold. We know that intake is on hold right now. That's what we know. We know that we've tried to get money. We've tried to borrow money, grant dollars. We're not getting it. We know that at this point. We don't have it. And this didn't just happen day before yesterday. This has been ongoing now for years. We're not moving forward. We're in a holding pattern. And in order for us to be diligent, in order for us to be serving the community, which is what we were elected to do, we need to look at other options. We can't just keep carrying forward with blinders on, which is what we're doing. We expect this pot to boil, and we've been standing watching it boil for the past 4 years. It's not boiling. Let's find another option. If in the meantime our pot starts to boil, that's grand, but at least we've looked at other options that we are not doing at this point. We just aren't looking elsewhere. It's not diligent.
Given the complexity of the project, and it's been very complex and very, I'm talking, please. It's very complex. I know this because I've been on the committee for a long time, and I know that all alternatives have been looked at in terms of the ability to access, whether it's other parts of land or the ability to, in the negotiations with Fisheries and Oceans, we have to look after the fish. They've been extremely demanding in terms of, for example, we had to work for years to get the intake location changed. That didn't happen overnight. These things, the size and the magnitude and the complexity of these projects take a long time. It's not something you do within the space of a couple of months or a year. It takes a long time, and that's what's happened in this case.
And so to follow up, here's what. From just the standing room only crowd we had tonight, these are community members. These are the people who elected us. These are the people who expect us to provide the leadership that they need to bring the infrastructure to them that they require for the least amount of dollars. That's their expectation from us. And so just to keep stonewalling, whether it's me or whether it's Mr. Wicks or Bob Smith, whoever it is that we continue to stonewall, is not leadership that they're expecting. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't care that Trevor Wicks was reporting or anybody else had come up with some new idea. It wouldn't matter to them. They wouldn't be here. Wouldn't matter. It matters. This is water. It's gold. And so we have to be diligent. We have to consider other ideas. We haven't. We need to.
You realize you'd be asking, if your motion succeeds, you'd realize you'll be asking the city to spend a lot more money because we'll have to go back and get this information.
The city's already spent $5 million, and we don't have a water treatment plant, and we don't have an aquifer storage.
I completely and utterly disagree with you that we don't have a plan. We've got a great plan.
Plant.
We've got a great plan. We're ready to go. We'd be ready to go to design plans and specs for the installation of that water system. Okay, Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess one thing that I do think might be helpful for people, but I honestly don't know how feasible this is to have some idea of whether or not such a plan as Mr. Wicks has proposed is in fact doable. What kind of money would be involved with it? Would DFO even consider this? I mean, I understand the concept. That being said, I'm not sure how feasible it is because my understanding is that DFO would require something very, 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 very detailed in order for them to look at it. But I could be wrong. So I just don't know because I think what we do have is the absence of information. People want to compare some things and try to understand something that on the surface looks like it would be fairly simple and straightforward, but in fact is quite complex. When we talk about aquifers, there are aquifers at different levels. We have the surface water, we have intermediate aquifers, we have deeper aquifers, and so on. As Councillor Powell brought up, even the notion if you divert some water, which in some ways, okay, whether we take it from higher up the river or up at the dam, or if we take it down lower in an approved area, it still is taking water from the river. With Mr. Wicks' proposal, it shows it holding in pools that then would slowly get into charging wells, and the theory is that we would avoid the treatment plant doing that. How much water would be produced by these? We don't really know. But that being said, I don't know how much time we can ask staff to spend on this, but to answer some of these questions that the public do have, given the information that they've been presented, and is presented in such a way that makes it very straightforward and accessible to residents, but in fact the reality might be more complex than that. So I don't know, is it possible to get even some kind of a ballpark figure as to what such a proposal would cost, what would be involved, the steps that would be involved, and whether or not DFO would even consider it?
CAO?
If I may, Your Worship, first of all, options have been brought forward. As Council is aware, I believe at the November ERWS meeting, 4 additional options were reviewed by the ERWS board and eventually brought forward to Council. There's a motion in place right now that in the event that Plan A, which is the full build-out, is not doable by May of this year because no grants have been authorized or provided, that we look at Plan B, Option 4, which is the one that we're currently using. So alternatives have been looked at. We have spent a considerable amount of money on consultants to this point at Council's direction. Those consultants were hired to look at the requirements of the community, to look at the water sources that were available to us and to provide, in their professional opinion, the best and least costly option for supplying water to the city of Parksville. Those professionals did look at all feasible options and have come back with Plan A and then Plan B, 4 different options of Plan B. So we have looked at them. If you want us to look further, then you're going to have to give us a budget for us to hire, again, consultants, professional engineers, environmental professionals, people that are familiar with DFO, Ministry of Environment regulations, to review the suggestions that were brought forward today to come up with some order of magnitude cost and feasibility. Again, these would be additional cost over and above what we've already spent. Right now, we're in the position of, again, waiting for the federal and provincial grants to be authorized or at least announced to give us the number that we need to take to the electorate to provide the borrowing. That's where we're stuck. We have a plan. We could go forward right now if we had the funding. We can't get the funding until we know the grants. That's where we're stuck.
And the negotiation, the glitch that we had in March, or we got the letter in February of DFO, that's going well. The negotiations are going well, and that's going to be an okay situation.
DFO actually requested a meeting with staff with regards to that letter. We have met with DFO. We've had the opportunity to discuss their concerns, to provide them more of the history of AWS, ERWS, the dam, and the benefits that the dam have provided. Their original thoughts were looking at the current river flow and the effects that the intake would have on the current river flow. Now that they have the full history, they're willing to look at the pre-dam flows for any additional enhancements we have to provide, which is exactly where we hope they would go. So as far as that DFO letter is and the construction permit, that seems to be resolved. We do have to go through the application process, which should be finished August of this year. Again, we're still stuck because even then we don't know the grants. The federal and provincial government has not announced that. The latest information that we've got is sometime late September, October, when those announcements will be made. As soon as that announcement is made, then we know the question that would have to be put on the referendum for borrowing. That's where we are right now.
Councillor Salter.
So, number one, when you say you've got a plan A and a plan B, you got a plan A. Because plan A is a plan. It's the water treatment and the aquifer storage. And it's plan A is we'll spend this much money, and plan B is we'll spend that much money. But there's no different. There's no other plan. It's the same plan, just how much will we spend there. So there isn't a plan A and B. It's a plan A. There's no other option. That's number one. And when you said you had these 4 other options, it's all about how much are we going to spend. It's not, oh, well, we're going to do it this way, or we might try digging a well, or we might try. No, we're just going to do the water treatment and the aquifer storage. That's it. That's a plan. That's number one. Number two, the referendum. We talked about the referendum, and what I was told was that regardless of whether or not the community approved the referendum, this will go through. So regardless of what they say, this is going through. That's number two. Number three is we have 2 wells, K Road and the Claudette. They're both shut. Neither one of them are being used. The last meeting I was at, I heard that they were both shut down. Those are 2 wells. We don't have the grant money. DFO, we're on hold for DFO. We don't have water. The city needs water. We don't have any. We have a plan. We don't have Plan B. And if Plan A doesn't work out, we don't have Plan B or C. Why is it difficult for us to consider another plan, another option? And as far as dollars go, we don't have any problem thinking we need $600 for a room to store paper in. I think we can, or $600,000. We can come up with money, $30,000 to drill a well. That's nothing compared to the $5 million that we've already spent. And if we drill a well and we have enough water to supply the community, maybe that can be our holdover time. We have an option now. We've got water. One plan doesn't make sense at all, and not at all for any time, for anything any of us do, whether it's at home or whether it's on council. But on council, we have to impart due diligence. We have a mission statement that we, the city, have created, and it's to provide good governance, provide prudent financial management, enhance Parksville's lifestyle through effective leadership, community involvement, and commitment to providing services in an effective and efficient manner to all residents. And yet, when residents come and speak to us, we dismiss them. They're not experts. We can't go there. We have to go talk to an expert out of the United States. We can't do both. We can't talk out of both sides of our mouth at the same time. So we have to stand on what we say, and we have to stand on what we've promised. We said that we would look into this. We need to do that, and we need to listen to the community.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. I can understand Councillor Salter's frustration, and I can understand that there's many, many people in the community with that same frustration. And it mostly comes down to the cost of this project. I'm on board with this project if that's all we got to do. But I do think maybe there's been a lack of communication from whoever, council, EWRS or whatever, with the community. I think we should be talking to them more and explaining how things are working and where we've spent our money and so on. I think we leave too much unknowns. We were going to have a town hall meeting, and maybe we should have 2 or 3 town hall meetings just to explain. Trevor Wicks is not going to go away, and maybe we should be pointing out the fallacies in his program if, in fact, there is a fallacy, because he's not going to go away. So we have to make it known through the newspaper and through public hearings exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think there's maybe been I know we've had several meetings, but I don't know whether the public have had a chance to talk and understand the process. So public hearings are important, and we can take some time and answer everybody's question. And as I say, Trevor Wicks isn't going to go away, and I don't know whether anybody has ever written in the paper or told the community that his plan doesn't work, if in fact it doesn't work. So, but I think this should be done. I think communication is important, and we should look into that.
We've committed to a town hall meeting, and I agree with you. If we need to have 5, we'll have 5. But there have been meetings, as Mr. Squire pointed out earlier this evening. There have been meetings where the folk have been invited to attend on the water system. These were detailed. There were maps. There was all kinds of information in terms of flows and that sort of thing. It was great. I went to some of them. There was a great deal of information. So I think you're right. Now, at this point in time, Councillor Salter has a motion. The motion has been seconded. I think we should vote on that motion and then move on, because after that motion, we'll still have to decide if the motion does pass, then we're into more. We're going to have to spend more money. So let's deal with the motion. Your motion is that we turn your microphone on, please.
Oh. So the motion is, let's look at other options besides our only Plan A. So let's look for a Plan B. Let's look for a Plan C. So we have a back door. It doesn't have to be Trevor Wicks's plan, but we have to find something else that's not Plan A. So a Plan B that we have in place. We can say to the community, look, we actually found something else. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but at least we're considering something else, another plan.
Okay, there you have an explanation of the motion. We have a seconder, CAO.
If I may, Your Worship, I think it would also be appropriate to put a dollar value to that.
Would you care to put a dollar value to it?
$600,000 for the room.
$600,000. Okay.
Just one comment.
Okay.
Is there any options out there where we don't have to go through all of the engineers and all these people to do, if we come up with one idea, do we have to go through another $5 million to find out about it? I mean, there must be a lot of other avenues, other different towns and municipalities that have the same problem as we have. Is there something that we can look at without us going all the way and costing us a fortune?
I can answer that. The other towns and municipalities are spending a lot of money. I think Nanaimo is going to spend about $140 million. But anyway, I don't know if anybody has the answer to that. So we have a vote. We have a motion mover and a seconder. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That motion is defeated. Do you have another motion?
I do have another motion, and that is, judging from the standing room only crowd tonight, I can see that the community is very interested and they want to be engaged with council and they want to be engaged with the decisions that are made here. And so they should be, because it's they who direct us, not we who tell them how it's supposed to be. I'd like to make a motion to proceed with the town hall meeting, which was set in January 2015. It was to be implemented and in place by the 15th of April. The community have been waiting for years for the opportunity to speak to council. The meeting is about a shared community engagement and needs to proceed as promised by this council. In addition, I would like to set 4 more town hall meetings, one every 2 months, in order to ensure that the community have the opportunity to speak to us and that we have the opportunity to engage, to provide insight and expertise to council. In this, council will be following through on the promise to engage people in the development of their community.
Do you have a seconder for that?
I'll second.
Okay. I just want to comment on the postponement of the meeting that was supposed to take place on April the 13th. I'll take responsibility for that. At the meeting, at the ERWS meeting on March the 13th, we were there to discuss the impact of the letter from DFO. And that letter indicated that there could be delays, there could be extra costs, there could be all sorts of implications, and we hadn't had the opportunity to push that through or to discuss that through ERWS, which is the proper body to discuss it. Once that was discussed, there was a series of motions made in terms of where were we going to go and how we were going to get there. And one of the things is we knew we had to sit down and have a meeting with DFO at the senior levels so that we can get some indication of what the impact of that letter might be. You heard from the CAO tonight that that meeting took place last week. That was a successful meeting. They'll be meeting again. I would fully agree. I'm committed to meeting with as many people that want to talk about water as we can, and I would suggest that the town hall meeting, the next town hall meeting on this particular issue, which is water, we would do that, give ERWS a chance, just to clarify your motion, give ERWS a chance to report back on the meetings that RDN staff and city staff had with the fisheries and oceans officials, so we can get a clear idea of what Mr. Manson was talking about this morning as to where we're going, or a little earlier as to where we're going with DFO, and it seems that it's going to go well, and we'll have the matter settled by the summer. So I would suggest that meeting be postponed till sometime in May, which is next month. Yes, Councillor Salford.
Sorry, and I do want to speak to that, and this is why. In January, when that motion occurred, there was nothing about DFO stopping the intake up on the Englishman River. We didn't even know that was happening at the time. It happened after the fact. That motion and that meeting was never meant to talk about the intake up on Englishman River. It was about allowing the community to speak. It was giving them that time with us, our time with them, to interact and to engage. If we need to talk to them about whatever happens with DFO, if we do this every 2 months, we will be able to have that conversation with them when it occurs. Because what happens when what's been happening with this project is there are always going to be delays. There's always going to be a reason to say, oh yeah, we're just waiting for something back from the province. We've just opened up the Claudette well. It's looking good. We're not sure. This can go on forever. People feel stonewalled. They don't feel that they're a part of this. They don't feel that they're engaged with us because we've always got a reason why we shouldn't have a conversation with them. We need to carry through with that. We need to go on the 13th, like we said we would. And then if something changes, we will have another meeting 2 months later, because that's what this motion is. Let's have a town hall every 2 months and engage our community finally. Allow them to speak to us. And it isn't about us telling them how it's going to be. It's about them speaking to us and saying, this is how we want to direct you. That's what this democracy is. That's what we should be doing. Listening to our community.
Rightly or wrongly, the reason that the meeting was postponed was because at the ERWS meeting, with regards to the implications of DFO, that would have come up at the town hall meeting, and we would have not been in a position, had we had that meeting like on Monday when it was scheduled to happen, we wouldn't have been in a position to answer, and we didn't know what position we'd be in to answer those type of questions. So now we know. So my point is, you're asking for a meeting every 2 months, a town hall meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just suggesting we start that in May.
And so what I'm saying here is, it doesn't matter if we don't have the answers. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have the answers, and we're not going to be able to. I don't know if we're ever going to get that grant. We don't know. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. They can ask us, and we can say maybe we will, maybe we won't. At least we've had the conversation. We don't have to have the answer to have the meeting.
But if I put myself in the position of a citizen that wants to know about its water, and it made the headlines in the newspaper before the ERWS meeting was held, you come to a town hall meeting, you invite 100, 150 people, 200 people, 300 people show up, and somebody says, what's the situation with DFO? You'd have to say, well, we don't know
That's
yet.
right.
And
Yes,
that's really
correct.
frustrating. So
That's
I wanted everybody
correct.
to have that information and get that on the road.
And here, we've got corporate values here from the city of Parksville. We value quality service. We succeed by focusing our attention on serving the citizenry of our community. We believe in proactively involving our citizens in identifying community needs and deciding upon solutions. There's nothing else there to say. That's what we do at our town hall meetings, and that's why we need to have them, and we haven't.
I don't disagree.
Pushing them forward till May, something will come up, there'll be some hold up, or this will happen, or that, we can't talk about it. It'll just carry on. We need to start. We said we were going to have one on the 13th. I don't see why we're not having it. It doesn't make sense to me. We've got all these vision statements, mission statements, corporate values, and we're not following one of them. Why aren't we following them?
Well, I disagree. We are, because when people come to a meeting, I expect to have as much information as possible to give people, coming back to the values that you just described. Because to come to a meeting and say, well, we don't know, well, when are you going to know? We don't know. We've got to meet with them. So I think we'll simply, your motion again is you want to have that meeting on April 13th?
The motion is to have the meeting, to carry forward with that original meeting that we agreed to in January on the 13th, on April 13th, which was to be done before the 15th of April.
That'll be impossible. We have a budget meeting on April 13th.
Well, fine, let's have it on the 14th then.
Just point of information, for clarity. The motion, I made the motion. The motion was to have a meeting prior to April 15th.
That's right.
So I don't know where the April 13th date came from. In the absence of a motion that counters that motion, I understand that we will be having a meeting before April 15th, unless there's a motion coming before council tonight to postpone those meetings. Because I believe that motions properly passed by council here have to be acted upon and can't arbitrarily be changed or vetoed by any one member of council. So unless there's a motion coming forward somewhere later in somebody else's new business to cancel the meeting that was properly passed by this council to happen before April 15th, I expect that there will be a meeting happening before April 15th.
Staff, would that be physically possible to organize at this date?
If I may, Your Worship, to be able to adequately advertise it, no, it wouldn't. This issue, I believe, was discussed at a budget meeting. Indications were made that due to the reasons that you had outlined, we would be postponing the April 15th or the April 13th meeting, which had been discussed up to that point. No dissension was brought forward as far as I was concerned So we took that as motion or direction from council that it was on hold. That's where we're sitting right now.
Yes, Councillor Powell.
So has this motion from Leanne been seconded?
Yes, it's been
Okay,
seconded by Councillor.
call the question.
The motion is to have the meeting on by April 15th?
We were just told we can't.
Pardon me?
We were just told we can't have it by the 15th.
Question's been called. I have to call it. So, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated. So, Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. And ahead of making a new motion, I would like to ask a question of Mrs. Tardif as to what sort of time would be needed in order to properly advertise such a meeting. I would like to say that I do agree with Councillor Salter that, we need to do this, we need to do it sooner.
We all agree with Councillor Salter.
And we don't need to have all the answers.
Mrs. Tardif.
If I may, Your Worship, with the original motion to have a meeting by April 15th, I developed a couple of different strategies. And we discussed them and sort of chose one strategy for the meeting. And it's logistics, it's layout, it's advertising, it's fairly comprehensive. So I think there needs to be the better part of a month to 6 weeks to get the word out. Ideally, the first information should be in the city news page. We need to be able to put some ads in the paper, on the website. If we really want to do a good job, then we need to make sure that people know about it. And there are only so many ways to do that.
So on that bit of information, would it be reasonable to have it, you're talking about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks? Yes, you have a motion. Okay, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to rescind the previous motion that called for a meeting on the 15th, by the 15th of April, and propose that we have a meeting scheduled in 6 weeks' time. Now, is that the proper wording?
I think we should get it. I think we should give staff a date. I think we should give them a date.
I think just a motion to reschedule the meeting would be the right way to go about it. And I think, based on what I heard here, that logistically it might be something that could happen by the end of May. So if we said that the meeting previously that was scheduled to happen by April 15th to be rescheduled to May 30th prior to May 30th, unless I hear objections from staff about that not being logistically possible, I think then that maintains the integrity of the motions that council have passed, and that would be...
So would somebody want to make that motion?
That's the motion I made.
Okay, you made the motion?
Yeah.
Seconder?
And I would like to
Seconded by Councillor Patterson.
I would like to suggest May 25th.
I do have one more. And so just to add to what I had originally said, I would still like to see 4 more town hall meetings, one every 2 months, to be scheduled every 2 months with this.
That issue has been decided. We voted on that already.
We voted on the date.
Your original motion was to April, and then the 4 additional ones. That motion has been defeated. I think, according to parliamentary procedure, you'd have to bring it up at the next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Greer.
On a lighter note, everybody leaves on a lighter note. I just like to bring everyone's attention, especially the newspaper, that our CAO Fred and his daughter Elizabeth is running in the Boston Marathon. And I think they should be recognized. I think Fred's looking to break his own record. I keep telling him just to run to have some fun, but I think he wants to better his time. But anyways, I think it's rather a great situation where a father and daughter can run in the Boston Marathon. It doesn't happen every day. So congratulations for your attempt, and hopefully you'll finish in good style.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I do have a motion. I would like to make a motion that council request staff to organize a town hall meeting with the express purpose of obtaining input and recommendations from Parksville citizens on the potential for the highest and best use of the vacant lot on Jensen next to this PCTC, and I would like to suggest it's in 2 months on the 27th of August.
Seconded by Councillor Oates. Any further discussion on that motion?
Yeah, I'd like to hear it again.
Okay. Do you want
You
to
didn't
read
hear that?
Well, I didn't.
That council requests staff to organize a town hall meeting with the express purpose of obtaining input and recommendations from Parksville citizens on the potential for the highest and best use of the vacant lot on Jensen next to this PCTC on August 27th.
Okay. Councillor Beale, aren't you going to tell us about our meeting with Joe Straka?
Absolutely. We had a delightful meeting with Joe Straka, who is the president of the Oceanside Community Arts Council, who made a presentation to council and stressing the importance of the arts and culture for our community and the citizens, and a brief history over time. So it was very well received, and that's all I'll say about that.
Councillor Oates, no? I just have a couple of quick items. I won't take very long. I've met with the PDBA. We're going to have a meeting with the downtown business owners on Saturday afternoon, May the 30th, from 2 to 4 in the forum here. This is to discuss with the downtown owners in terms of looking ahead to downtown revitalization, in terms of what some of their concerns may be. I'm going to be asking staff to dig out for that meeting some of the long-term plans in terms of infrastructure replacement and renewal in the downtown area, in terms of what projects there are, in case one of the owners might say, I'd like it to move it up because I'll do this and that to my building. So it'll be an exchange of information, and I'll certainly report back to council in detail as a result of that meeting. One item that I need to ask council for, and we need a little bit of money, we've agreed to share the cost of mailing out the information and the invitation to the downtown business owners, and I would need a motion that we provide our colleagues at the PDBA with about $350. Can I have a motion on that? Mainly for mailing out the information and the invitation and stuff that we want to send out. They've asked to share with us. They're going to split the cost 50-50. Property owners, I'm sorry. Property owners. So can I have a motion that we spend?
I'll second.
I'll take Councillor Greer and Councillor Oates. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Tomorrow I'll be attending an agreement in principle signing with the First Nations. I received an invitation. It's particularly the News First Nations are involved, so I'll be attending that signing ceremony on your behalf, and we'll see what happens with the agreement in principle. It's an agreement in principle for a treaty with a number of First Nations. I can't pronounce the Malahat First Nations, the Songhees First Nations, the Beecher Bay Indian Band, and I can't pronounce the other groups.
Are we involved?
Pardon me?
Are we involved?
Well, we're invited to the signing, so we'll see what impact the signing might have. Might lose your house.
Did we have a motion on that? Or?
No. I'm just going on. I'm going on my own. I've been invited. Everybody okay with that? I've received an invitation. I've accepted to go on behalf of the city. The invitation came to me.
Signing something.
No, I'm not signing anything.
Oh.
I'm going to a signing ceremony.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Okay.
Pardon.
Okay. Signing.
I'm signing.
He's signing away your rights.
Oh, I know. God.
Okay. On that note, is there any other new business before we go into camera? Thank you.
Second.
We're in camera. Thank you very much.
That was a long session.
Yeah. Well, I figured it would last about that long.